All right, if you want to call the roll, Sarah.
Sure. Okay, Greg Braille.
Not here yet.
Phil Burton.
Here.
Tony Carrasco. Not here yet. In-Young Cho. Not here yet. Larry Klein.
Here.
Nadia Nayak.
Here.
Keith Reckdahl.
Here.
Dave Shen.
Here.
Carrie Templeton.
Here. Great. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Okay, we're going to start with staff update, and then we'll do the oral communications. And Ripon, do you want to tell them what we've been chatting about?
Sure. Philip, do you have anything before I get into some of these questions that XCAP had? Okay, hearing not. So our staff update provides for some of the questions that were asked of the staff in the last couple of meetings, and I was able to get some resolution or get more information regarding some of the questions that came up. So we'll share that information. I'll share my screen so that, and then this becomes a public document after we, discuss at this meeting.
I just want to acknowledge that Tony just joined for the record. So hi, Tony.
Here's my share screen. Sorry about that. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So first question was regarding the shoe fly linear cost, and some of those costs are per linear foot was $550 per track foot. Wow. And if you are double track, then it will obviously double. And then it also adds some additional costs for temporary OCS as well as removal of the tracks once the shoe fly is no longer needed. So those costs encompasses those features. So that's where the shoe fly linear costs are, in case if you're looking at alternative that extends or shortens the shoe fly to estimate some of those numbers would be helpful for XCAP.
Ripon, do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
So typically a rail track bed has ballast, or in some cases concrete to hold the cross ties. So if you're laying a shoe fly track down on Alma Street, does Alma Street have to be prepared to receive the track bed? And is that included in this cost?
I would assume that this is to the Caltrain standards, and therefore, whatever is needed to accommodate the shoe fly, but I can confirm with the ECOM.
Just curious, because of the axle loadings on rail are a lot higher than axle loadings for vehicle.
Yes, so this one would accommodate for all the Union Pacific and Caltrain, because all those tenants will still be using those tracks, right?
Yeah. So what I had in mind is the repair or restoration cost of Alma Street after the shoe fly tracks are taken up. That's my question. Yeah,
and that may be in a separate item for.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Estimates, yes. How much width of the
what OCS stands for?
Overhead catenary system.
Okay, got it.
The power lines.
Yep, yeah, got it.
I'll put that down for our glossary.
Now the OCS, is that just one? So if you were doing double tracks, do you have to pay for 2 OCSs or 1 OCS?
It's per linear foot, so it would provide for both. It would be my assumption for the linear.
Okay, so a double track then would be a total of $1,500 per track foot. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yikes.
Okay.
No, 1,500 or 1,100. It's $550 a track foot, and you get
Plus
2 of them.
400 for the OCS.
Gotcha. Sorry. Okay.
And Another question came up was regarding the right-of-way sliver takes, and so it could vary, and in some cases it could be 1 to 2, but they are no more than more or less less than 10 feet wide. So the slivers they've been called for. Another question came up was regarding 1% rather than 2% or 1.4% slope that were assumed in these alternatives. And could we come up with some kind of a guesstimate on the cost estimates? And AECOM was saying, the response was pretty much that it has to be customized to the solution or the to the slope that we are looking at, because 1% slope like at Charleston Meadow could impact then the San Antonio station, and then further south into even closer to Rank Trough, north of that Rank Trough location. So there's a shoe fly that's needed, and all the structures that would be needed to accommodate for 1% slope would be extensive, and therefore any other scenarios that has to be more like a customized solutions to those numbers, and therefore we cannot give like a factor to estimate how much more cost would be for those alternatives. So at this time, it is not feasible to calculate the cost for those different scenarios in between.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit of clarity to XCAP, because this is a question that I asked, in our estimates on the matrix and on the fact sheets, the only alternative that only goes 1% is the hybrid. And so my question was really around if you had a 2% hybrid, understanding that, yes, that would need a Caltrain design change, but if you had that, would it cost less? Because presumably it's half the length, right? So that's what that answer is about.
The next question, what were the maintenance costs for various alternatives? So we had this question asked at different occasions, even before, and we have not developed any long-term maintenance cost on the different maintenance items, including the pump stations or dewatering. But we did get some response from Caltrains in our conversations or communications with them, was that they will take maintenance responsibility of new infrastructure that will lower or raise the tracks, embankment, viaduct, or bridge, but the city shall assume it is responsible for cost to maintain any trench or tunnel alternative. So just a little bit more information, but not pretty clear or specific information regarding the maintenance as well. So maybe that would be helpful to put in the report.
Just a question for XCAP here. Wasn't there some place where it talked about the cost of maintaining the viaduct? I think, Phil, you were asking about like, what is the cost of maintaining, what does this really mean?
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah.
Because
And
I wasn't sure what was included in that comment.
Yeah, I think the Churchill doc said something like, oh, the viaduct will cost more to maintain because we didn't really have a reason.
Yeah, but on the matrix.
Yeah, and Greg, on the face of it, the track bed shouldn't cost more to maintain. I mean, maybe marginally more, but so I just wonder where that comment came from.
Yeah, and obviously I want to acknowledge that Greg just made it, so make sure you mark him down as here. Yeah, so I'm sort of left confused then. This tells me that there isn't an additional cost of a viaduct because Caltrain is saying they would assume maintenance. So that'll be changed in the fact sheets in the matrix then?
I will look into it and then see if it's how it is specified there.
Yeah, Dave, do you remember? Because it was in the Churchill section. I think it was on the matrix. I don't have the copy of the matrix in front of me. Do you recall offhand?
I can pull up the matrix if that's.
No, I don't recall.
Okay.
Offhand.
Was it in the matrix on the?
Yeah, long-term maintenance. I think it's there, and I think it's under the Churchill one.
Under the Churchill.
Under the viaduct.
You mean?
It's on the next page, I think.
Long-term maintenance.
Yeah.
Increased maintenance costs are due above ground railroad alignment with embankments and viaduct structures.
So I would ask AECOM, given what we just heard from Caltrain, does that change any of these things in the matrix?
But does that mean increased maintenance costs due to the city, or is it total overall?
That's the question. But if Caltrain is saying that they're going to take care of the maintenance, then it's irrelevant to us.
Okay.
Right. And so, because we only care about what we have to pay for. And presumably we're choosing the alternatives based on cost to the city, not on cost to Caltrain.
So maybe it's not important, but what is Caltrain's justification for saying we'll take care of the above ground stuff, but not the below ground stuff?
They don't really want to enter a tunnel, Greg.
That's what I'm trying to ask.
We'll pay for everything, but not that. Yeah, I mean.
Okay.
Well, they also may have different definition of maintenance. For example, they may be maintaining the structure and the structural integrity and maintaining the tracks, but not doing graffiti removal or a weed removal. Things like that may be.
Or maybe pumping costs.
Correct.
That was behind my question. Keith, that's exactly behind my question.
But this is saying Caltrain will take on the maintenance responsibility of new infrastructure that raises or lowers the tracks by embankment, viaduct, or bridge. So they're not saying that they'll take on the cost of pumping the water of the depressed road. They're only talking about the structures that hold up the train. So it actually doesn't, it's not the same.
Oh.
Right.
So I took that to mean if they graffiti the embankment, that Caltrain covers it, but maybe this is a question. I mean, I don't think it's not going to be the difference between picking one alternative and the other. I just want to make sure that as much as possible when we're writing in our report what this means in plain language, that we know what we're saying.
Mom and dad will pay for us to have a Toyota, but if you want a BMW, you got to pay for it with your own money.
And the extra insurance. Yeah.
Nadia, I'm wondering whether it really matters, because the maintenance costs may differ alternative to alternative very little. It may not be too much. So
yeah, I agree. And that's why I'm saying, but if it's on the matrix as some kind of defining factor and it's not, then we should remove it. I only want to see anything that makes a difference in us selecting something.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, Ripon, go ahead.
So the last question was regarding the right-of-way impacts, temporary versus permanent, on the option 1 or 2 of Churchill Avenue closure and partial alternatives. And so usually a temporary impacts are going to be there for all alternatives, because we are going to work within the Caltrain's right away, either for transfers or longitudinal work in all different alternatives. The question here probably specifies a little bit more, and discussing with AECOM a little bit, was longitudinal encroachment into the Caltrain's right of way is required for Churchill Avenue closure with mitigation 1, because the ramps are parallel to the railroad tracks, whereas for option 2, it's only transverse encroachment into the Caltrain's right of way. And transverse encroachment along the roadways are a little bit more traditional and therefore easier sell typically. However, for Churchill Avenue closure with option 2, the transverse encroachment will be below ground, and so that's the difference between option 1 and option 2. For partial underpass, it will require both transverse and longitudinal encroachments, and that would mean, because of the tunnel and the ramps, that would be required for the Kellogg Avenue crossing and the partial underpass option. So that provides a little bit more clarification on the kind of right-of-way impacts or the encroachments that would be on the Caltrain's right-of-way for Churchill Avenue. And we will make consistent notes on both matrices to make sure that they're consistent with this language.
And if you could ask AECOM to give us a good definition for longitudinal and transverse encroachments, that would be helpful, because I'll put those in the glossary as well.
So longitudinal would be along the tracks.
No, yeah, I know. I'm just saying have them write it in their nice engineering language, so you save me the step, because then I can put those into the thing. So if you want to send them along, great. I'm just tired of playing, Merriam-Webster over here every time I have to try to.
I'm not sure we want to get into that.
I'll try to get a good definition and send it to you, because every time I call AECOM,
it costs us money. Great. Then you and I can work on it. Thank you.
all right.
Larry, what was that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'm not sure we want to get into that type of detail in the report.
Well, I think the problem is that we were trying to discern between option 1 and option 2 and what's a permanent encroachment and what's a temporary encroachment. I was more interested in that. And to me, the longitudinal encroachments that are sort of along the tracks and are permanent are more of a problem because that is a permanent encroachment in their operating area versus like in the bike tunnel on number 2, where it goes directly under the tracks as Ripon is explaining, that's not such a big deal for doesn't impact Caltrain operations necessarily. Yes, it's an encroachment on the right of way, but it doesn't. And so what I was looking for was not so much the longitudinal and transverse, but what impacts operations or what has a bigger impact on operations in the long term and which ones were permanent and which ones is just during construction. Because that wasn't.
I think the reader would be interested in all those things, but not interested in the words longitudinal and
okay.
And whatever.
We will use a long and a cross.
Transverse. Yeah. Well, anyway, just part of that lesson. We're trying to keep this simple.
Yeah.
So I think that concludes my responses to the questions that came up in the last few meetings. If you have any question.
Are you going to put that in an email to us?
Yes, we will make it attachment to the next agenda as well as forward it to you in the email.
So I had a suggestion on those 2 words. If we could call it perpendicular and parallel.
Perfect. Much better.
But do the parallel encroachments only affected if it's at ground level, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you had a tunnel, like I was sketching out for that bike tunnel, if we did Kellogg, where it would be kind of a funnel, and as you got closer to Pally, it would open up. You now are introducing a parallel encroachment, but it's underground.
Yeah, I think what I was just trying to get to is at the end of the day, you're going to have encroachment always when you're building something on the right of way. And the bigger issue is when you're finished, did what you build impact the space in which Caltrain can operate? And is it permanent or just during construction? That's really all that matters. The rest is sort of extra.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so your question was pertaining more to the surface level impacts rather than the below ground or above ground. So, but we wanted to make sure that it was more, because usually the words surface level right of way are not kind of industry standards. So.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so moving on to oral communications. So this is the time for anybody, members of the public who want to speak on an item that's not on the agenda. Now would be a great time. Looks like we've got one so far. I see Roland. Hi, Roland. If staff wants to help me.
Sure. And okay, Ripon is going to share the timer. Right. So one person has their hand raised, Mr. Roland Lebrun. I'm going to, so you should now be able to unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you. I did, and I can't see the timer, but that's okay. So on the breaking news front, obviously, Palo Alto, thank you for, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for re-electing former Mayor Pat Byrd. I think this is going to be a complete game changer. I don't know if you know this, but Supervisor Simijian will be appointed to the VGA Board of Directors on January the 12th. I'll give you a couple of BART updates. I don't know if you read the papers. On the BART extension, the average operating subsidy for the first 6 months was $300 per passengers for that 10-mile extension. Something that you may not know about is that we now know for a fact that the costs for phase 1 are $1.1 billion over budget. And the way they got away with it, they got 2 sets of books. The board is basically monitoring the federal funding. And then there is another part that basically nobody's monitoring. Right now it's got $1.1 billion in it. Moving on to Caltrain, again, going back to the VTA. VTA is the only agency in the Bay Area that will have a surplus of CARES Act funding at the end of FY21. It could be anything between $50 and $80 million. And what we're proposing, since we have got people being left on the road, actually, we just had a transient on Route 68 to Giro who just died because they would not let him get on a bus. And he was left on the side of the road, and eventually they found him the next day, and he was dead. And what we're going to propose is that, actually we did it this morning, is that the VGA works with Caltrain and use that surplus money so that half of the trains on the new schedule, which is 2 trains an hour in the peninsula, go all the way to Gilroy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. It doesn't look like we have anybody else, so we'll take it back. Okay, so on to item number 4. This is the part where we sort of talk more about organizing the report than going into the meat of the report. This is my bad. We should have updated how many minutes this is going to take. It's probably going to take more than 10 minutes, but that's okay. But I'm going to let Dave and Phil drive on this portion. I meant to say at the beginning of the meeting and I forgot, for members of the public following along, you should refresh the agenda link that you have for today's meeting because they have updated the attachments and you will see one that's called Table of Contents. That is what Dave and Phil are going to be talking about. So this is piggybacking on the last meeting where we were having the discussion of, we're editing we're swapping groups for these sections. And it's kind of pointless to keep editing unless we actually understand what's the format that we're trying to get to. And so Dave and Phil wanted to have that conversation. So I will let them take it away. Go for it.
Phil, you want me to start?
Yeah, why don't you start, Dave?
Yeah.
I've got to go get my printout of the table of contents anyway while you talk.
Okay, sounds good. So what I did was I took first the documents in the state as they were last week with all the submissions. I generated a table of contents. And then in the process of looking through the edits, since we switched groups, now I was editing the Charleston Meadow document, and Greg, who was doing that document, is now doing the Churchill one. I realized that there could have been a lot of miscommunication and crossover. And then when I saw the document that Greg did, it looked like that happened because we didn't coordinate. And given our process, it's very hard for us to coordinate. There were a lot of things being moved around, and I could have done that too to match the Churchill document, while the Churchill folks would have matched the Charleston Meadow document and resulted in a lot of extra work that I think didn't need to happen. So that's where when Phil and I were tasked to kind of look at the table of contents to maybe let's take a step back first and look at where we are now, set some ground rules, discuss a little bit, even down to like, is it a summary of actions or executive summary, the names of some of the headers that are in there. Let's get coordinated so we're not constantly editing, deleting, adding back, deleting back as we're switching back and forth. So, so what I did was I assembled the whole document, generate table of contents, and then sent it to Sarah to send to everybody to talk about. I actually, just a little while ago, took everything that was submitted for today and also then regenerated table of contents. So it's slightly different. So we can look at either one, although the one I sent last week is missing a few elements, and it's definitely missing the major edits of the Churchill document. I didn't make as many edits simply because I didn't want to, after looking at it and realizing that this could have happened, that I just said, okay, I'm gonna just stop for a second and let's talk about it, and then we can go back into editing. And it could set us up nicely for all the work that we're gonna do in December over the holidays on this document. But at least it'll make it a productive one if and when we choose to do that.
Yeah. So what I'd like to, say, Dave, can I make some comments?
Absolutely, go.
Okay, so when I looked at the table of contents and printed it out, the first thing that is apparent is that the Churchill document organization is different from Meadow Charleston. So in Churchill, you have one chapter with sub-chapters inside. Whereas for Meadow Charleston, you have chapters on each major issue or topic. And I kind of like the Churchill organization better because it focuses everything relating to Churchill in one chapter. So if I'm concerned about Churchill, I go to chapter 2. If I'm concerned about Meadow Charleston, I go to chapter 3. Otherwise, I have these functional headings with presumably content from Meadow Charleston, as well as content from Churchill in each of those functional chapters. And it would get very confusing for the reader. And so once, I think what needs to happen, Nadia, are you okay?
Sorry, I was just going to ask. I'm not aware that there's any, and maybe you'll explain it, but I don't recall there being any Churchill information in the Meadow Charleston.
No, they're not. It's not. But when we finish this, we might. I mean, presumably you need to have a consistent table of contents, because really what we're talking about is not the table of contents in a narrow sense. We're really talking about the structure of the report, the whole report design. So if I'm Councilman or Councilwoman X and I pick this up, I want to know about Churchill. I want to know where to go. If I want to know about an issue within Charleston Meadow, I want to know where I go. And then if I say, gee, what about the same issue for the other crossing or set of crossings? Where do I go?
Right.
I think for the average reader, they will be better served by 2 large self-standing chapters with all the issues, topics inside. But that's ultimately your call.
I'm okay with that. I think that's what we have. I think the only difference is the numbering that seems to have happened. So Greg was able to generate some kind of 3.3, and I think that was based on our original outline sort of thing. But really, Churchill was also chapter 3 originally. So I mean, if we want to change, I tried to stay away from the numbering because I figured we could do that at the end. It's also it's harder for Sarah.
And I mean, so did I. I mean, I put numbers in at one point just so we could have numbers, but whether the actual numbers to me are something that's
no. I don't mean
later.
to be obsessive with the numbering. What I'm obsessing about is the actual structure. For example, we have Meadow Charleston is 3.3, and then we have something called detailed comparison of the options, additional considerations, pros and cons of the alternatives. It's confusing.
Okay.
Again, we're talking about a document that will probably run close to 150 pages with appendices.
Oh yeah, it's going to be.
That's a heavy lift.
Yeah.
Very heavy lift. And it's incumbent on us for our own sanity to try to get this structure nailed down, because the longer we don't have it nailed down, the more work will be required to do cleanup at the end.
So everything in this table of contents I'm looking at from 3.3 on down is 3.3 point something. So I think it's just, this is a numbering confusion.
All right. Well, I guess
I think there's a little bit of difference, and I'm going to let Phil and Dave go a little bit further. The only thing I did want to say is the reason that the Churchill one, and Greg and I had this conversation, we originally had, when we reviewed the Churchill options, it was viaduct and then partial underpass, I think, or partial underpass, then viaduct, and then closure. And the reason it looks like so much red is because what I suggested was it's easier to understand the partial underpass bike tunnel if you've already heard about the closure with mitigation options. And so in moving those 2 sections, it made it seem like the entire beginning of the document was really heavily edited, where all it was flopping around those 2 options so that it made logical sense. So I just want to, there's a bunch of other smaller edits, but that was the big reason for the red at the beginning.
Okay, so let me say that I'm both referencing the table of contents we have and looking at the 2 separate chapters. So this, by the way, this situation is not the least bit surprising, given we didn't address all these issues earlier on. So this is not that I'm casting even the slightest bit of aspersion or throwing any even light amount of shade.
Okay, so they're both technically supposed to be, right now, the way they were set up is they're both chapter 3. It's chapter 3 and then chapter 3 Churchill and chapter 3 Meadow. We can change all of that numbering and take it out. So I think we can just refer to them as their own chapters. But I'd be interested in the part where I think Greg's point is that the part where we go into detailed comparisons of the options was the part that he sort of added to the outline. And I guess the question is, did you guys think that that worked better, or does it belong in some other position, or what were your thoughts?
Well, and keep in mind, the job that I was given is that 4 individual teams wrote 4 individual docs.
Right. No,
And
I
then the assignment was turn it into one doc for Meadow and Charleston, but we didn't reach a conclusion. So you have to explain all the pros and cons from all 4 of the original docs. So it's going to be longer than the other one.
Yeah,
Right.
no, that's a very good point, Greg. But let me also mention slightly, if I take a 25-degree jog to one side, that it's my hope that after we get this report written, that we have an opportunity to review the final written or near final written report, and maybe even reopen the question of, we want to come to a recommendation instead of just leaning. That I don't think we can get there to that question until we've got everything kind of boiled down, netted out, structured in a way that's easy to evaluate, because there's an enormous amount of information here. And if it's hard for us, just imagine the poor city council people.
Okay, so you want to
So
lead us through?
Yeah, and you know, I think we probably could have a good, healthy debate on the detail within each alternative. So let's just say, for discussion's sake right now, that we have chapter 3 is Churchill and chapter 4 is Meadow Charleston. Just for discussion, what does the internal outline of each chapter look like? And then we come to the issue that they brought up, which is rationalizing and making consistent things like terminology, which has to be made consistent. That's not to minimize that point.
Nadia, after having been away for a week, I thought that summary sort of conclusions that Greg wrote was very useful. And I sort of caught, not only did I catch up, but I thought the comparisons were very much what we had spoken about and we've sort of almost coalesced on. I thought it should be another chapter, maybe like chapter 5, which is headed by that title.
Okay. Anybody else thoughts, or Dave and Phil, since you guys are
Or a chapter on safety.
Yeah, that's not in here. Good point.
Well, I mean, it's very hard for me to follow the document. And I think that, you know, familiar with one thing and the other thing, it's like, can we have a template? So what, you know, whatever it's written, we just collect them all and, you know, we find a good format that is more understandable and then make a template. And then, you know, we fill it out in a template.
So we tried to, I mean, we tried to set up the template. That was initially what I tried to do, right? But as with anything, when you start to write and you know, a template is very prescriptive, but as you begin to follow that template, you'll quickly see that the template that could be used when we've made a decision for something is not the same as the template for when we didn't have any agreement on stuff. And so while at Churchill, we had one way of explaining what was happening. When it came to the Meadow Charleston section, you really ended up doing more of a summary of like, okay, well, this is what we looked at and these are the pros and cons, but none of us agreed. And so that's why you can't have a template.
I mean, that's fine. So whatever they have it today, like, who cares about what happens? So what we have is the most important stuff. So look at the important stuff and pick out the, you know, content we have. These are all the good contents we like to put. So, you know, have a template, and some sections does not have a conclusion because they can decide on you don't fill out, right? But at least we should have some consistent way of managing things, because for me, I don't know, like for me, it was very hard for me to follow, basically, right? So
I think what Phil and I are trying to do right now is we had that template in Young before.
Yeah.
We tried to follow it. We spent many weeks, months getting to this point. I think it's time to relook at that template because it's being changed as we speak. And so
I think we're all saying more or less the same thing in slightly different vocabulary.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess what Phil and I are asking now is, now that we see the template as it's automatically generated by all the work that we've done, missing safety, I have to throw that in there somewhere, and maybe Tony's suggestion. Are we still okay with it? And I have some detail level stuff, which I can pull up share screen in a second, but
I think it'd be helpful if you could share screen because folks at home
Okay.
do not have this. And so,
well, I'll show the original one first, because that's where a lot of my comments are. And then I'll go to the new one, which unfortunately didn't get sent. Let me see here. Is it this one? I think it's this one. All right.
I'll be curious to see what the difference. I'm pretty sure the only big difference is what I described, which is that we moved closure with mitigations first and then partial. I'm not sure there shouldn't be too much else.
No, there isn't. They were very well. Actually, you can see Greg's and yours a little more clearly, because the one I'm showing right now is the old one, right? So I accepted changes on your document to get rid of all the orange and the crossouts,
right?
And generated the TOC, so you can actually see it a lot nicer.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah.
But I'll start here and then I'll go to the other one. So I had, I was looking through mostly mine because I didn't have the other one when I was creating this. But there are things like, it says executive summary. And I said, well, maybe we should call it summary of actions, because that may get confused with the main executive summary.
I think that's fine, unless anyone really cares.
Yeah. Let me see. This header, choosing between let me see. Which one is that one? Okay. Options considered by XCAP. It's just now some of these are little and some of these are big, but it's like, okay, we call it options considered by XCAP here, but it's actually something else back in Churchill.
I don't think, but I think we didn't have an alternative that was considered by XCAP and is not being and wasn't voted on. I mean, the difference is that these are considered by XCAP and then we didn't vote on them. And the only difference is the citywide tunnel, which we agreed we had to put in somewhere because it's a very popular item.
Well, it's just do we group the options that we considered during the Churchill deliberations together under a header? That's what I'm asking. This is just a structural thing.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the meaning or the semantics of what you just said.
Sure.
I'm just saying, like, over there, they're just bare, right? They just start into viaduct closure.
Sure, you could put a title on it. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, right, it's like a lot of this, if we don't do this, I think that the reader will go through and go, that's kind of weird. Why did they make them, out of the header and,
Yep.
So,
okay.
But the basic idea of saying, first thing we're going to do is tell you what the options were.
Right. Yep.
Well, let's decide is that, and
yes, I think
it's a visual thing, right?
Yes.
Then it's this one here. I might swap this with pros and cons. Yeah, I might put that underneath because the pros and cons, I suggested that maybe we might be able to join that with the city council criteria, because there's a lot of stuff that's more like there's city's council criteria stuff, which is more from consultants and outside folks. And then there's the things that we thought about in combination with that. So that's just a question.
I think this actually just comes from the matrix, right? It's called additional, that second section so there's the city council criteria stuff. And then the second part of the matrix, which is engineering criteria. I think they called it additional consideration.
So 3.1 and 3.2 we're looking at here are basically a summary of the matrix.
Exactly.
I really think that's an important section, and an important section to keep fairly short. I think we'd be doing our readers a disservice if each one of those 1 or 2 paragraph sections in that part of the doc turned into 6 or 7 paragraphs. But then the problem I had when I was putting this together was that section 3.3 was the 4 docs written by the 4 teams who all felt strongly about what they had to say, and I didn't feel like it was my job to take out things or put things in. So this section 3.3 is a cut and paste of everything in the 4 original documents that didn't fit somewhere else, basically.
And you're talking about the metal Charleston, not Churchill, right? When you say
yes,
that?
yes.
Okay.
The section 3.3 that we're looking at on the screen right here.
And
okay.
Dave, from what I see, your Churchill section, you have compared with city council criteria, and then you have another heading called additional consideration. So it's the same. It matches the matrix.
Yeah. In fact, I think I made them even more the same when I worked on it this week.
So the question for me is, should we add a pros and cons over in Churchill? The same, and I didn't. I'll go to your document in a second where it resulted, so I don't know what happened there. But should there be one over there?
Well, we didn't, because that one is where we as a committee decided the pros and cons and came up with a solution, right? Like we voted, and so we didn't do a pros and cons generic pros and cons because we weighed all that as a committee and we voted on it and we ended up with a choice.
And dissenting opinions.
Exactly. And so that's why that next part is different from a structural standpoint.
I would like to say that I don't see any need for the two sections to be totally parallel because of the difference in where we came out. Once we have a decision or a recommendation in Churchill, that drives somewhat of a different organization than at Charleston and Meadow, where we don't have a recommendation.
Larry, I'd like to say that
I don't think we've got to be embarrassed by having a different framework for the two sections.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also want to comment that there was what you might call the neutral description of each alternative, meaning this alternative involves this kind of design, this kind of cost and time duration, and these kind of impacts on community. And those should be roughly parallel, just as a way of helping the reader find out this information. Clearly, the
and in line with that, I want to go back to Greg's statement that he didn't feel that he could edit the pros and cons section 3.3.
No, but that's not the pros and cons. This is like there's an initial description, and then there's a separate analysis of the pros and cons.
Well, no, I think that the inevitably those 3.3.1 down to 10 do have to be edited just to be consistent in style. And there may be some places where people might disagree. I haven't gone over it in that type of detail.
And we might
I
take
do
some
think
stuff
that,
out too.
Yeah, and clearly the subheads under 3.3, those have to be reasonably consistent and in parallel, clearly.
So if I get this correctly, Phil, what I'm hearing you say is that in the Meadow Charleston option, we have a neutral description of each of the alternatives that doesn't really exist in the same way on the Churchill side.
Yeah, and it probably should, because what if somebody said, I'm getting all this pressure, there are people who want to the viaduct for Meadow Charleston.
Okay.
None of us favor that, but still there are people in the community, and the council might hear from one person saying, don't you know how great the viaduct is because of X and Y? And they need some kind of it doesn't have to be big, but some kind of a description. Viaduct means this.
I think we have, so maybe it would be better if we looked at the actual docs, because I feel like everything you're talking about is addressed in the latest versions of both docs. So for instance, if I go back to the Churchill doc, originally the Churchill doc was why you should pick closure with mitigations for Churchill. And I edited it a bit. So it starts with a more neutral description of the options and a more neutral comparison with the city council, and then moved on to, and here's why the majority voted for closure with mitigations.
Yeah. So Greg, my only point here is that we need a document structure that makes it easy for a reader to find exactly what they're looking for in a 100+ page document. And that's the argument for the common set of headers, to the extent feasible.
Look, I think,
as opposed to making people dig out information.
So the only structural difference I understand is, in terms of what you're calling a structural difference, is changing. Let's see. Can you scroll to where it says Churchill Avenue, Dave? So right there. No, sorry, Churchill. You're right. Keep going. Oh, this one has numbers on it. How come this one has numbers? Did you just add numbers?
Did you want to see the old one or the new one? This is the new one.
I was looking at the new one. Yeah.
Okay, so here is the new one.
Yeah. So I think all you're saying is that to make it match Meadow Charleston, you want something that says options considered by XCAP and then describes them similar to the way they're described on the Meadow Charleston section. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next thing it would move into would be choosing between the alternatives, which is the part that you're saying is missing, which exists in the Meadow Charleston, but not in yours.
Yeah, and the reason for it, the reason why it doesn't exist in Meadow Charleston is because in Meadow Charleston, we have a minority opinion. Sorry, in Churchill, we have a minority opinion and a majority opinion. Whereas
Right,
in Meadow
and-
Charleston, we have 4 opinions with no majority for any of them.
But what I'm hearing Greg and what I'm hearing Phil and Dave say is that structurally, if you're a person, a lay person who doesn't really know where XCAP ended up, and you want to pick this report up and you want to be able to read the description and choose between the alternatives at Churchill, you want to be able to jump to that section, and you want to be able to jump to a similar section at
Sure.
Meadow Charleston.
I don't see any reason not to add that section.
I think that's fine. Yeah.
Recognizing that because of recognizing that we have to guide the reader to the fact that we couldn't make a decision on Meadow Charleston, making that obvious.
But I think it's fine. I don't mind adding a like adding a piece that makes that match from a table of contents perspective. And it may just be a paragraph or two. It may not be very long. So.
No, exactly. It doesn't have to be more than
that's
just
fine.
enough to get the reader going and to not leave the reader with too many open questions in their minds.
Sure. Next, Dave, you want to go through the...
Okay, back to, no, we did these. I was curious about this empty one, additional comparison analysis.
Yeah, I think we can take that out. That was the original, from the original outline. I don't think we came up with it.
Copied Nadia's original outline.
Yeah, we could take it out. And again, remember when I did that outline, I was just throwing spaghetti on the wall to be like, okay, let's start somewhere. We'll pare down.
Yeah. And then just which name do we want for this one? Unless you guys, let me see, changed it. No, suggested future work.
I mean, honestly, the most confusing part of all of these docs are the multiple sections that are areas for future study and suggestions for more information. We seem to have them kind of scattered all over the place.
Yeah.
If we're going to focus on anything, I would love to find a way to put all those in a consistent way.
My thinking in thinking about policymakers was the following. They're reading the very beginning executive summary. And by beginning, I mean like literally you open the cover. If this was a paper document, you open the front cover and that executive summary, not what we're now calling summary of actions, right? They read the executive summary. They hopefully read the glossary or key terms. I think Larry and I decided we're going to change it to. Read the executive summary. And then they would have a summary for policymakers of actions and then reference to the more technical recommendations, right? And in the appendix,
I want to put in there that was one of the points I want to raise. I think that the report really bogs down if you put those at the front.
Yeah,
I think they ought to be at the back.
Okay, I'm fine with either. It was just what I thought needed to be a repetitive thing was after you've read the Churchill section, I think it's important that the recommendations about Churchill are in that section. And then once you've read Meadow Charleston, I think there should be recommendations about Meadow Charleston in that section. And then I think in the appendix, there should be a summary of all of the recommendations together in one large document. And the reason for the repetition is that oftentimes you could have something on the table of contents where you could have all recommendations listed in one giant sheet. It is as a section that they go to in the appendix, but that makes the appendix grow, not the body of the report itself. That was sort of my thinking. So I'm okay with there being repetition, but only so much as that it repeats again in the appendix, if that makes sense to anybody.
I'm okay putting lots of things in the appendix, but I want the document to flow and to read, which gets me also to the missing safety section. Where do we put it? Because the heart of the report really is our recommendations or Charleston, Meadow, and Churchill. And if you have those close to up front is where I think they belong. That only then if we only go to safety after that, safety seems like it's sort of almost an afterthought.
Well, what happens to the old "Why do we need grade crossings" section? Is that still in the beginning?
Yeah, that's here. That's in chapter 1.
To me, like, why do we need grade crossings? I mean, safety can be
one.
Near why do we need grade crossings?
Well, it's kind of detailed. So if you read the safety section again, there is a lot of, and you should have this type of fencing and it's this high and it's this wide. And so I don't know, we may, I thought it would go after you've looked at Churchill and then Meadow Charleston, and then it could even be under additional considerations, I guess. which has noise and whatever. I mean, I'm open to where it could go. I don't have a strong opinion, but I'm not sure it belongs so far up front because it is kind of specific. Like you need these blue lights or whatever.
I think the issue with safety is I don't believe, unless I'm misremembering, the council didn't call out safety as a specific criteria, but we all feel it's very important.
Right.
Particularly
Agree.
in light of the accident record, the FRA statistics on the Palo Alto crossings. I mean, those are really alarming.
Now, why do we need grade crossings? As I recall, there is a short section in there that calls it out. So
Yeah, it's on the screen right now, Greg. Do you see? It's on chapter 1. Yeah.
Yeah, Greg, we're only giving it a page, and you wrote, I don't know how many pages on safety.
Well, it's not that long, but I want to make sure it's in the report.
Yeah, it's in here. I think when Dave created the table of contents, he was going for the meaty stuff. So I think that got dropped off, but it's there. It's not getting lost. And you know what? I'm okay tabling the discussion of where to insert safety. Let's go through this bulkier part of like the meaty part, and then because I think we'll find a natural place for it once we've debated.
I like the idea of right after what you have here, which is why are we going to do it? You go straight into Churchill, Meadow, Charleston.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. Okay, Dave, you want to keep going?
Yeah, just a couple more down here, I think.
Yep.
Did you guys put in a discussion on noise over Churchill?
I added a noise section because but I think that there's sort of a general noise section because noise kept coming up over and over again.
Agreed.
And we have a noise report, but I felt like we needed sort of a summary of the noise report.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there should be one in Churchill. I just realized I never touched it when I did it.
Well, noise is part of this council adopted criteria. So it's almost like up above we talk about noise, and this is additional information about noise section. We could probably get away with just one section like that in the whole report.
Yeah, although the thing is that when you're looking at Meadow Charleston, you have a lot more comparison of one versus the other because again, we didn't have a decision there, right?
Yeah.
Now I think if I recall, the meat of what's actually in that section 8.1 is about future studies of noise and what should be included. I think that's really what that is. And so.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think it went out. Oh, actually, did it go into this? No, I don't think there was a. Yeah.
Because we have I'm looking. There's a noise on page 14. If you guys have a printed version of the Meadow Charleston section, we have traffic studies, and then we have. Oh no, that's a traffic study table. Never mind. I thought it was a noise table. No, I guess it's not woven in there.
There you go. Yeah, this was part of it is
this is all the noise stuff right here.
Yeah, this is really a summary of the noise report, but the noise report was pretty long and dense.
Yes.
I guess in this case, it would be whatever in the noise report applies to Meadow Charleston. And if there's anything like that for Churchill, I just realized that I never put that in there. So
yeah, and to me the main thing to note is that if you close Churchill but you still add a noise parapet, you can actually significantly reduce the whatever remnant noise there is.
I guess I'm thinking just more of, we did a noise study. Where should we put those results?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
in and around Churchill.
Yeah, so let me just make the observation that there's a difference between noise from, let's say, the viaduct and noise from keeping Churchill, keeping the tracks at Greater Churchill. So if we are talking about each of the alternatives in sort of a quick, neutral, descriptive sense, we might include noise as one of those descriptor items.
Which I think isn't that what you did, Greg, in your section? Don't we have, I could have sworn there was a thing that says this one's louder, but this one's
No, there is. If you go up to the council adopted criteria.
That's it. That's where it is.
And then you had pasted more stuff in there. And I moved that into this section.
which is fine. I mean,
Um,
I'm all for putting it in and then people can decide where it goes. There's certain things that I don't want to lose in
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, so one way to get the noise bit in there then is to follow where Greg has choosing between the alternatives. I think that's the section where there's stuff about noise. Yes, am I right about that, Greg? Do you recall where it is?
if you go up to the section that is the council adopted criteria,
Oh, okay.
it's like 3.2. One of the criteria is about noise.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, so if we could go up to 3.2 something, and I know that things are weird.
3.1, 3.
I can bring it up on my
It's
screen.
3.17, at least on the copy that I had printed out.
Yeah.
Reduce noise, rail, and vibration. And
Right,
so that's where he has.
Because that was one of the council adopted criterias. And
Right.
then I attempt to summarize the noise. And I felt like in the summary, we kept having to use more and more words. So I tried to keep the summary really short.
Yeah.
And then because noise has been controversial, I thought it would make sense to include more stuff.
So if you want to beef up the Churchill side to make sure that you have noise stuff, then that would be, I think, the right spot to put it. And then what Greg did was the more detailed stuff explaining noise stuff is in this 8 point whatever section.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that underpass section 8.4 is going to get removed. So that's going to go into an appendix. I'm working on that.
Okay.
But
yeah.
quite honestly, I'm going to work on it over break. I couldn't turn it around that fast.
Originally, I had the beginnings of a history of Churchill as well.
So I did the history of the underpass simply because it's the one that got the least work and wanted to put in there. If you want to do something similar for Churchill, I don't remember what was in your history of Churchill and where that ended up. I apologize. I don't recall.
It's more the timeline suggestion, right? It's like.
So we have the timeline. We do have a timeline, that master timeline. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at that, but we do have, that's very thorough. And I encourage everyone to review it because it really does have it goes all the way back to 2008 when high speed rail got voted in. So it's got a lot in there. But that entire 8.4 is going to be in the appendix. The only thing that I think is really crucial, and I'll edit this when I do my edits over this next break, is the fact that the technical advisory committee didn't actually want to release the meadow plans, but we sort of had to, because that was as much as we were going to do because of COVID, and we weren't going to be able to spend any more money on it. But that they really were sort of far from not only what was proposed, but sort of meeting the goals of what the community needs are. And even though the history of the underpass section that going into the appendix now has kind of a long blow by blow about that, I think just that sort of those main concepts will need to get woven back in. So I'll work on putting that back in there, but I just wanted to put that out there because for those of us on the TAC, that was sort of a key critical thing.
Okay. So then it comes to the end of my comments, which is I'd love to see the appendix filled out just so that we know if something's going to be there, then let's take it out now from up top and put it down there.
Right.
So we can start finalizing the sections. So, and let me see here. I just started going with appendix on this one because I had nothing there.
Great. Yep.
So I'd love to, if you already know, Nadia, just give me a list. Let's just create a.
I think I started one already. I think I started
Okay.
a document already that has all the appendices. And I
Awesome.
actually think I might have started a folder on a Google Drive where I've started to drop the actual final noise report, final traffic report in there so that it's kind of an easy add afterwards. But yeah, if there's anything else, I think what I'm going to work with Larry to figure out is, we just have a lot of, it would be helpful in my opinion, when you're reading the Churchill section for the first time as a member of the public, and you have, for example, viaduct, we should have all of the pictures and graphics and exhibits that have been created about the viaduct at the very beginning, and then have words that explain the viaduct, right? Then whatever our text is, and then have the next exhibit for the closure with mitigations and all the graphics that have been created, so that we can make reference back to in diagram, whatever, you basically will have them all inside that report. I think that's rather than sending everyone to look at a picture in the appendix. Does everyone feel that that's okay?
My comment about that is it would be awesome if you and Larry would just decide how many of those graphics you want. And
yeah. I think we have to put them all in. Yeah. No, I will. But I'm just saying from a reading perspective, if you were looking at this for the first time and you're like the Churchill Viaduct, if you don't put all the pictures of the viaduct in that you've ever seen and you're the first time you're looking at this, you're not going to know what we're talking about. And so I know we put in like the ones that help us understand them the best, but really like we have to put the bird's eye. Some people are plan view people. Some people are, I need to see the street view. And so basically everything that has been created by AECOM needs to be put in each of the alternative sections.
I would suggest that maybe we do that towards the end, because once you do that, the document is going to become so large that only one of us will be able to touch it at a time.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just if you use Word, I mean, my
Yes.
Word doc was already too big for Gmail. So
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think I agree with Nadia. I think we need to put all the images in because it informs some people about what the words are saying. Not only that, but I don't think they need to be really large. I think they could be 6 per page or whatever. But
yeah, I think it depends on the graphic. But that's why you'll see in my edits, sometimes I just put insert page whatever here, which is their images, because I didn't want to make the document grow. Carrie, I see you raising your hand.
Not to beat a dead horse here. I think what we're bringing up right now is exactly why we can't really do this effectively without staff involvement. Like that, what you're describing is integrating our work and the contractor's work and staff work into one document, and that doesn't make sense for us to do as a citizens advisory group. That's now you're really starting to talk about creating a very professional document that incorporates all of these things. So, any word on your professional editor?
Yes, it looks like we will hopefully get help towards the end. So, but we've got to do the heavy
small
lifting
amount
here.
of help, yeah.
A very small amount of help. So hopefully some help with the graphics. So we'll get help on that kludgy part. But to Larry's point, we will be editing, still the actual content in words.
Right, but
So,
that was very valid. Whoever brought up the file size. I mean, this is getting.
Yep.
So I mean, that kind of stuff's got to happen at the
control.
end.
Yeah, that
someone
has
just
to
gotta
happen
assemble
anyway.
this at the end
And
in
that
one doc.
frankly is the stuff that Larry and I are going to deal with. So the more important stuff is that does everyone to the extent people, we're all members of the public, we're members of this community. And if you had to pick up a packet and read about a project, you'd need to see pictures. Do we agree that the picture should be in line with the text or in the beginning? That's kind of what I'm looking for. So I think I heard a yes from at least Tony. If anyone else has any ideas.
I'm fine with it. If you want, I think part of the problem is when we're just using the blind screen capture to create the graphics, it's popping in like tremendously large graphics.
Yeah.
So I was just trying, as you were talking, I was just thinking like, was there a way that someone could send me all the graphics that people want to put in there? I could run it through Photoshop and just reduce everything down to like something smaller. And then we could pop them all in, because I think that part may be educational for us to do that, just so that when we look through it, go, and are we going to have a reaction like, oh my God, it's 2,000 pages now? Or are we okay with it, right? Does it feel and flow well? And I don't think we can do that unless we actually do the exercise of popping those images in there.
Well, so, I mean, the only images that we have is whatever has been produced throughout this process, right? So it's the matrix, the fact sheets, and then any other pictures which you would be able to find on the town hall, all the images in the town hall, basically. So I think we could ask AECOM to send us maybe the files of all the things that they've done and see if they can send it to us in their most reduced format.
Oh, that would be a way to do it. So let's say they put it all in Dropbox. They share it with, say, me. I have these batch programs over here. I could run them through and reduce them down to like less than 100K a piece. Then everybody can pick those and pop them into the respective documents as they see fit. That would be another way.
Great.
of
I
doing
think the only ones that I feel strongly need to remain like in the entire 8.5 by 11 is those technical drawings that show like, the sound wall is 6 feet tall and the tracks are 20 feet high. I think those need to be big because they're really hard to read otherwise.
But do you want to put those in the main flow of the document, or you want to put them only in the appendix?
I think we have to your point, I think we have to see what it looks like because honestly, people who've never seen the viaduct, some people are going to be able to look at just the bird's eye view or the street view and be like, oh, I get it. And other people are going to want to understand like, well, how far away is it from my back fence? And what do they mean when they say the poles are this high?
So that's fine. But still, for the purpose of us editing, we can pop in a placeholder that is a lot smaller.
Sure.
And is less fuzzy.
Well, and let's be clear. Some of the renderings from AECOM are massive number of pixels, much larger than will be needed to print out on any reasonable printer on 8.5 by 11 pixels.
Totally.
I think Dave could easily remedy that.
Yep. So Ripon, could I ask you to ask AECOM to give us those?
I just wanted to share with you that all the pictures on the AECOM's vrpaloalto.com are reduced size already. So they are very efficient and quick to come up. So anyone can download it from there and they're all reduced sized already.
What's it called? We Are Palo Alto?
What is We Are Palo Alto?
We Are Palo Alto was a virtual virtual town hall website. So the Connecting Palo Alto website has all the larger size or full size pixelated high resolution pictures, whereas the one which are on VR Palo Alto, they're all very efficient to download and quickly they are like the lighter version or the
well, it says everything that the XCAP who's been working on this for this long has never heard of never heard of wearepaloalto.com.
That was on the virtual town hall's backend name and
oh, that's the backend name. Okay, all right. So
can you email us the URL of that?
It's Is
it just literally that?
Yeah. Try to put it in. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, VR. No, V as in virtual, R as in room.
VR.
That's what I thought.
VR. So not we are.
Virtual reality. Got you. Okay, virtual reality.
There you go.
Okay, just click anywhere first, please. Now you will enter. Okay, and then if you go on you go on Churchill Avenue.
So up on the main wall, on the back wall, Dave?
Oh no, on the table.
Oh, I thought they're here.
The back wall has all the videos only.
Sorry.
It's all right. That was my bad guidance.
So on the table, if you click on that. Yeah, I also go on this website for easy access and quick access. And then if you go on to closure with mitigation and all the renderings and the pictures, so if you click on the top.
Oh, here.
Yeah. Anyway, this one will pop up and you can just right click to save it.
But is there an easier, it seems to me, excuse me, that
it seems to me that all these files are in a directory somewhere that someone can share with.
Yes, exactly. Could they just put them on Dropbox and share the whatever is sourcing this? Because it's a pain.
I can't grab these right now.
Yeah, it's too hard to go into each one of those and right click and download and make sure you got them all, right? Because what if he misses some?
I was trying to save some dollars from AECOM. That's
let me ask this. Might you be able to right click for those and then share that with Dave?
Let me see if I can do it.
Yeah, if you guys know how to do it. I mean, because
Greg, would you have the programming mouse?
I'm also on the Mac.
You want me to write
it on a PC?
Yeah, Dave, you can write a crawler for storagenet.fs.com.
Nadia, what is your daughter doing over break?
Exactly. Yeah. I got the strong train. That's what I got.
All right, we'll get you one or the other.
All right, great. And that'd be easiest. Yeah. So we can feed that appendix. I did want to say that I had a conversation with Sarah, who's been helping us from the staff. And, up until, when Sarah started, she started to make those PDFs that we get every week of all of the public comment that we've received prior to the meeting. And previously, that wasn't quite how Chantal was doing it. So Sarah's going to help me. We're going to figure out how to make sure we get all of the public comments that XCAP has received since the XCAP email was set up. Into a big giant PDFs that we can also put in the appendix. So expect that also for the appendix, Dave.
That could double the size of the report.
Well, we can make book 1 and book 2, Phil. Like it doesn't have to all be in the same thing, right? Typically,
Volume 2, 3 through
yeah,
10.
typically the appendix is its own volume.
Understood.
Yeah. I mean, I am much more concerned with making sure that the appendix has everything that we can, because in my experience of doing this I haven't done this that long, but just in the 11 years since High Speed Rail started, they redid their website 4 times, broke all of the links, and now actually none of the documents are available publicly. You have to do a public records request to get them. So I would rather that our report errs on the side of putting in as many documents as we can that we know exist into the appendix, because city websites change, people leave, and then trying to remember, oh, well, so-and-so had that as part of this meeting, they disappear. So
another thing you might be able to do is open all of the fact sheets in Adobe Acrobat Reader. It might be easy to extract the images that way.
Okay. Well, we'll take this part of the conversation offline. I think it sounds like we have enough technical minds on here that people can figure out how to make these images smaller.
Yeah, Dave, can Photoshop handle PDF files? I'm not sure. I've never tried it.
Yeah, you can place them and stuff. It's faster for me to just screen cap it and save it though. When it comes in, it's just the big image. I can't.
Yeah, the only point I want to make is we have to make sure that we have 300 DPI for, at the expected output size of the images.
I propose a publishing committee that figure all this stuff out.
Okay.
I propose that we defer the question.
All I want to do is be able to put something in there just for us to look at and not have a 50,000 megabyte file download. Let the publishing committee deal with the 300 DPI.
Which is yet to be created or appointed.
Yeah, it's coming and y'all are on it. You just don't know yet.
I don't know about
that. Okay, so
Phil, you have any more about the TOC or
no? I think I've beaten those points well into the ground, and I think.
But that's fine. But did you get the answers? Are there any other questions of like?
I think we need to simply do it, and then there might be one more fine-tune iteration.
Okay.
We've got to get to the point where we can do that fine-tuning, and we're not there yet.
Okay. If it's okay with you guys,
but I'm very happy with the discussion.
Great. Okay. I'm going to move us officially to the next item on the agenda, which is discussing the actual contents of the report, just so I can take public comment in case we have any, and then we can start to discuss like actual stuff that's in there. So we'll move to, where's my agenda? We'll move to item number 5, which is the writing and editing of the final report. If there's any member of the public who would like to comment on this section before we get started on the meat of it, now would be a great time to raise your hand. We don't have very many people, but I'm not seeing any hands raised. Okay, so with that, is there, we can start with substantive discussions of the different sections. I wanted to start with the dissenting opinion for Churchill. So I heard your feedback from last week about how you got, could we make it less biased? I started to do that work, but I didn't finish it this week. So I hope to have it for you guys when we come back from this break. I talked a little bit offline with Larry. We had talked about having the majority opinion, the dissenting opinion, and should there be a rebuttal to the dissenting opinion. And I think it's, the dissenting opinion is public. It's not like it's a surprise court case and you don't know what we're rebutting with. So what we agreed is that we'll make sure that if there's something that you want to rebut specifically in the dissenting opinion, you can just put that meat into this is why we chose it section, right? And so that way we can keep this short and not have a rebuttal to the rebuttal to the rebuttal and kind of keep going that way. So I will have that back to you guys by January 6th when we get back.
I wanna comment on the dissenting opinion on the section, because I don't think I made it clearly last time, because if it's a dissenting opinion is longer than the majority opinion that we have discussed, I think is something wrong. And second, a lot of times, like, Nadia, you said it, and it's very significant and all this kind of adjective. And I feel like what we discussed is very insignificant if you put a tone like that. So I think there is a significant or not significant or very passionate about it because it's not chosen, but still you have to consider how people, you have to be sort of, where do we put the focus, right? We want to spend more time on the like more stuff that we discussed, or like, you know, less discussed, or you want to put it equal, but
And you muted yourself by accident, I think.
Yep.
yeah. So I think it's just my point is like, so I think whoever writes anything about that kind of nature, it should have look at the tone of the what the major, you know, discussion was, and then, you know, write accordingly, sort of similar tone. That's what I like to see. I don't know how you other people.
Okay. Yep. I hear you. And you know, if there's anything that is factually incorrect or is misrepresenting anything, obviously we don't want to put that out there. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an opinion, but I hear what you're saying. And so look for that when we get back on the 6th, and you can feel free to take another stab at it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Tony?
Nadia, just to be clear, there's some indication that I've supported a viaduct through around Churchill. I don't support that, and I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, so we can pull that out. That was from when we originally did our deliberations. We started with viaduct, and you were the only one who raised your hand. But your discussion was around not the proposed viaduct, but in your own version of the viaduct, right? And so we included that in there to memorialize what happened, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what that's supposed to represent. I'm fine taking it out if you feel like it was insignificant enough, but.
No, I liked it. I thought it was all good and clear and accurate as to how we all felt.
Okay, so do you want to keep that in or?
Yes, I'd like to keep it in.
Okay, Carrie?
Just on that particular topic, I would love to depersonalize it. It reads a little bit like Tony got no support, but it was the idea that got no support.
Okay, yeah.
I agree. Yes, thank you.
Great.
I have some other comments, but I don't know where we are in the stack. Should I go?
Okay. Yeah, hold on. Let me just make sure that I make a note somewhere. That's in the in the Churchill
On the posted
section.
one, it's on page 23.
Okay.
And I'm a little confused because the posted one looks so different from the Google Doc that it's kind of blowing my mind. When I'm referring to page numbers on my comments, though, it's for the posted one from the agenda. I have 3 comments, and I apologize. I should have got these in before it went out, but I did not. So on pages 5 and 6, where we talk about the mitigations, I feel like.
Is this under Churchill or under Meadow Charleston?
Churchill is what we're talking about, right?
Well, I was just talking about the Churchill dissenting opinion, so I'm not sure if you want to talk about.
Oh, I thought we had moved on.
Oh no, it's okay.
So we can hold on
take
to those comments until you're ready.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine starting there. Is there anyone who wants to talk about a section first before we get into the different sections? I did want to say I have outstanding on my list. I have moving that underpass section that we talked about, the history of the underpass, into the appendix. Let's see, we got clarification from staff on what a sliver impact is. And so we can define that in the key terms. I did send out to you guys all the leanings chart that you had asked for, or that Larry had brought up. And so I'm not sure, Greg, if you guys will figure out where we're going to stick that in there. And maybe we can discuss that now in terms of the outline, because we don't have a leanings chart for Churchill. If you have thoughts on where that goes. Oh, you're muted, Greg. I see you talking, but I can't hear
you. I thought we were going to not get into that in the report.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But then Larry was saying he thought that it would be useful for policymakers, and then so there was sort of hemming and hawing. So
because it wasn't a vote,
right?
And we all picked 2.
Yeah. To me, the only thing I think Larry's point was including it in there to talk about leanings for priority work or study. Like if you had to prioritize which one do you think you might want to study, that these are your top 2. And actually what was interesting for me is that if you look at that graphic, which I don't have, but I think I could pull up, the one that has the most interest is the underpass for South Palo Alto in terms of that it needs more study, which I think is significant. So we can look at how to include that graphic. I mean, we don't have to include it how it was discussed in our meetings. We can tweak that graphic to serve the purpose that we think it should serve for this report. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Maybe we could say, everyone at XCAP was asked to nominate 2 alternatives for further study.
Right.
7 people picked the underpass, 4 people picked the viaduct, 3 people picked the high pit, and 2 people picked the trench. We could say that.
Right.
But I'm for one. I mean, I don't know if maybe people have changed their minds. So.
Do you have that chart on? Can you share that on the screen, and can we talk about it so that everyone knows we're very clear on this? Because this is a touchy subject, and I want to be sure that we are all in agreement on what we want to do on this.
This is what you sent in the attachment. This snapshot.
Thank you. I'm not on my computer. I'm on my husband's computer, so I don't have this. Can you zoom in for us a bit?
I don't know. I would have to zoom. Pushing a button, but nothing is happening.
Okay.
Hold on. It'll take me did it go away, or are you still looking at my tab?
It's gonna load in about 3, 2, 1. There it is. Perfect.
Okay. And there's the thingy.
Yeah.
This is what you shared with us in some electronic format that I can't figure out anymore.
Yep.
Okay.
So it says on the top, not a vote, most interested in studying. And so here's where we ended up in terms of what are the things that we thought deserved further study.
What are you thinking about including?
So
I don't really think we should include this in its current form, even though we've now made it public.
Yep. I mean, I didn't think so either, but Larry, do you want to speak to it? Because you were the one who talked about it.
Well, it was nice to be quoted. I don't remember what I said, frankly. So.
Okay, fair enough. I think that, so if I remember, your point, Larry, was it would be useful to have something that tells the council, that sort of shows that it wasn't just that we were divided, we were very divided. And when asked to look at things for further study, what did the group feel, deserve the most future study? And so to me, what's interesting is like, it's very clear we all have very different first choices in terms of study areas. But the pattern that I see emerge is there's a lot of people really interested in knowing more about the underpass, which supports what we have in the report, which is that got the least amount of iterations just because of time and COVID and money and whatever, right? So that's all I get from this graphic, but I don't know if somebody gets more, and we don't have to include this graphic. We can just say something in words. Yes, Carrie.
Well,
go ahead, Larry. You can go first. I want to comment after.
This is like the ranked choice voting, where you get, or maybe you get more points for being in first place. So yes, more people who voted to have more study of the underpass. On the other hand, 5 out of those 7 are second choices, not first choices.
No.
So I guess I would give I would put the chart in the appendix. Why not?
Well, one of the reasons that I'm a little concerned about it, at least in its current form, is members of the public, when we first showed this, gosh, that was months ago, they felt that the color coding was very biased and biasing to people that were interpreting it. I remember it flew around on some mailing lists, neighborhood mailing lists, and caused a lot of concern and alarm. So I want to make sure that if we do want to include this content, that we format it in a way that doesn't perpetuate those issues.
Sorry, what? I'm not sure I'm clear on the color coding. To me, the color coding just indicates visually like a green is an underpass and orange is a hybrid. Do you mean that it made it seem like things that are green were a choice?
I believe that was your intention, as you described, was just to differentiate visually the different choices. However, because of the red, yellow, green color coding and the context of this being a transportation issue, people accidentally, without the context, interpreted this as you know, good, okay, bad kind of color coding. And I
Gotcha,
know that
okay.
wasn't our intention, but that's what we were hearing people who saw this out of context kind of
No,
reacting that way.
I don't.
We
New
could go.
reader, no, new reader's not.
I think it's easy enough to remove the color coding.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's not a
That's what
big
I was gonna
issue.
say.
We don't want to cause a problem that we didn't need. We've got enough issues.
I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but it could be misconstrued as a vote or as a choice. And this is
Yeah.
this is an area for study as opposed to preference. And those are two different things.
Do you recall, I think you're on those lists when this was first discussed in the community, like somebody copied and pasted it and sent it around. Did you get the sense that there was a bit of alarm at seeing this
Oh,
out
yeah.
of context?
I had to talk a lot of neighbors down. Yes, there was a big concern. They considered this a vote. And I said, no, it's not a vote. And putting this in context was difficult.
So it was more about the fact that it looks like a vote, not the color scheme per se. In your experience, Keith?
The people I talked to, it wasn't the color scheme, it was the vote. But I could see that, you know,
yeah,
colors, green is generally good and red is generally bad. And that, what does that mean? I don't know. I think this is a Rorschach test. You can interpret this too.
I tried to pick primary colors because they're easy to see. I should have picked like shades of pink and purple that don't have any, like brown.
No, but if you're paranoid, you think everyone's against you. And so whatever color choice, you could flip the color choices around and people would still complain. So
I think given the unhappiness with the selections, different shades of brown would have been very appropriate here. That's what I really should have gone with, because that just captures the mood and everyone's thoughts on this. Tony, you were going to say something?
No, I didn't say anything.
Okay.
About the various shades of brown.
Yeah.
Couldn't we just put a disclaimer line at the bottom, like no significance to colors other than to highlight the different values or some word like that?
Yeah. So can you scroll a bit to the left, Greg? There's something at the beginning of the like there's a column A that I can't see. Yeah. So the X is we can't decide with current info, and then there's a note at the top that says not a vote. Most interested in studying. So again,
that could be italicized or bold or something.
Yeah, and this can be. I mean, this is just an Excel document. We can make whatever kind of graphic we want to relay this information. I guess my question is, as a group, what is significant from this table that someone feels like we have to put a sentence into the report? Not even a graphic. We can put a sentence. And if you are going to share a sentence, what is the main point of this? And I have trouble with that, but I'm open to hearing what anybody else thinks.
I think you've already said it in one of the parts of the report. It says that we have no consensus, and this chart reflects that.
Okay, Greg, I can see that you're talking, but I can't hear you. Greg, we can't hear you. You're still muted.
I don't use Zoom. I don't know where the mute button is. If you look at the first choices, no first choice got less than 2 votes. And only one first choice got 3 votes. So to me, what this says is
votes.
Right, but what this says is that we couldn't come to a consensus. I don't know how else to say it.
Right. So I don't think it's worth putting in, and because I think it's gonna create more confusion than what it helps with. I think the report as it stands says we couldn't come to a consensus, and we have suggested if you study more on the underpass, here's what you should look at. If you study more on the viaduct, here's what you should look at. So we've even been pretty even in terms of when you look at studying stuff, here's what you could think about for each one.
I'm sort of changing my mind. I can go along with that. Particularly if you go back to that first sentence that we had after, and which we played around with a lot, and maybe we still should do some more work on it, where we'd say not only that there's no alternative have a majority, but none of them has more than 3 votes, and
but they're not votes.
Has anybody who's really willing to be excited about it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I think, so I'm just going to say that this should be used to form those sentences, but I don't think we should include it because it's too confusing. Is that, everyone's okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Okay. And then the only other thing I had was that the dissenting opinion is coming, which I've already told you. Okay, so now we can get into different sections. Carrie, you want to lead us off with whatever your edits are for?
Does somebody want to open up whatever section we're going to talk about?
That'd be great. Carrie, you have edits for Churchill. Is that what you have?
Yeah, it's the one that's linked off of the agenda. Maybe it's a grid with all the chapters. It's not the table of contents.
Dave, it might be best if you, because I think you own all the Google Docs of those. So whatever.
Well, what I
edits-
was going to say, I'm happy to open up the church. Yeah, though I don't really want to start editing right now.
And I can send these. We don't have to edit in
Okay.
line. What I really want is feedback from the group, and also the page numbers on the one that was posted don't match the Google Doc anyway, so it wouldn't even be helpful.
Okay, all right.
But
So
Well,
points of
the sec-
discussion.
I mean, the sections all have names.
oh yeah, okay, this might be
So,
the one.
Yeah.
On page 5 to 6, the mitigations.
Hold on, I got to find 5 and 6. I don't.
Are you in Word? Because it looks so different.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Google
So,
Doc.
so
Oh,
what
okay.
I did is we did the editing in Google Docs, but it seemed to me that Nadia pointed out that what people really need to see is the diff from last time. So I used
Oh,
Word to generate a comparison doc. What I'd like to do then is merge them again, because I don't want to have this thing just be a giant diff. Plus, when you start merging them all together in either Word or Google Docs, they start to get all weird and they're double spaces and
Yeah.
double.
Yeah, okay, that
punctuations.
explains it, because I was very disoriented when I saw this version. I was trying to get the page.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
and unfortunately, it makes it look like there's tons of edits, which there were not. There was
I
some,
thought so too. I was like, what happened?
no, and that's what I was trying to say is that this document looks highly edited, but all I did was reorg the fact that I
Yeah.
made Churchill's closure come before the partial underpass because it's easier to
Yes.
understand.
I
That
mean,
was,
there's some smaller changes at the end, and I think there's a little bit of controversy we might want to talk about. So
yeah,
I might.
so
I,
let's
Okay.
go.
Well, I'll
let's
be
go-
quick. So on those mitigations you had at the bottom of page 5, additional mitigations here. I thought we were also requiring the improvements to the Embarcadero High intersection from the bike pedestrian plan. And I maybe I missed it in all the beautiful colors here, but that was like the
I'm
most
sorry,
important.
say that again, Carrie. You thought that what?
So there was some improvements. So here, wherever it said there's a signal improvement, like number 5.5, it says have signal improvements. I thought we also required the bike and pedestrian improvements there, because that's where there's a cut through the school and there's a lot of collision potential. And, you know, speaking to residents there, they were very concerned about the safety of that intersection. And I don't know if it's incorporated anywhere else. So I just wanted to check first. Did anyone else remember that? And, you know,
I
it's
took
okay
these
to
from
include
the, I think we took these from the notes of the, when we voted on the mitigations.
yeah, and we went back the next meeting and I re-emphasized that had been left out. So, okay, I'll just send those.
Yeah, if you want to
We
send it
can
along, but
include
I agree with you. I think that's actually, that might very well be included in what AECOM is proposing. So this might be above what AECOM is proposing, and that's why it's not, it's missing that. But I think it's an
Okay.
important thing that should be in there. So maybe a better way to structure this is to say, these are the things that AECOM proposed, and these are things we think on top of that.
Correct. That's
And
that's
so,
correct. I remember that it wasn't in that first proposal.
Dave, that seems, oh, did I lose Dave? I think he stepped away for a second.
Nadia, so that's how I recall it too. It was not part of AECOM's recommendations,
Okay.
but that we thought that these additional mitigations should be in place, prioritizing bikes and peds.
Okay. I think what would be helpful before we keep going with specifics for a second, and I want to wait for Dave to come back because I think that's important for him to note, is in discussing with Larry, like what we need to do over the coming break. I think we're going to change up the groups just slightly in that Larry and I are going to break off from our, you know, I've been working with Greg and Keith on their section, and Larry's been working with Dave. The two of us are going to break off into our own group so that we can review everything together on our own and let the remaining groups keep doing their own work. So we'll have 3 groups going. And that way you, Carrie, and others who haven't had a chance to participate but have edits now, we can get them in there. that might be the best way to do that. But Carrie, I don't, what group were you on before? What was your?
This was the document. I just was late in
Okay.
getting my comments. So I'll be able to add them in directly for the next edit.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't, yeah, that's fine.
Right.
And-
She was,
and-
yeah, you were working with me and Greg, right? So you're,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Dave, you
Nadia?
stepped away for a second, but Carrie made an important point, which is that on page 5, that's on the screen right now, where we have additional mitigations. These were the mitigations that XCAP voted on top of the AECOM mitigations. And so I'm not sure that do we describe the AECOM mitigations well enough in here? Or do we need to be sure that they're put in there, like listed well? And then the one that's missing is dealing with the bike path. Well, you say it, Carrie, which is the one that you thought.
Yeah, that we not only going to put a signal, which is identified here in additional mitigation number 5, but we also wanted to request the bike ped improvements from the bike ped plan at that intersection, because it is frequently used by students and pedestrians, and that's the only way we can make it work. So that was an important mitigation that several of us emphasized, and we want to make sure we include that in the document. Would that be? Do you remember that? Do you agree with that?
And I think actually it is included in the, we have a section for policymakers about overall bike ped studies, and it's called out in that section as well, but I think it's worth reiterating here.
Yeah, I think that just remembering back to this very turbulent vote, that mitigation was a make or break for me. So I want to make sure we include it.
Okay.
Similarly, later on page 21, we start talking about traffic can be mitigated if it's moved elsewhere. We want to make sure we talk about the bike and pedestrian traffic and not just the vehicular traffic. So I can add that in. That's on page 21. And I think those are like some blue charts. I'm recalling correctly, they're graphics.
Yeah, there are. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We may have passed it up, but yeah, it's these things we're talking our traditional, style of measuring vehicles, but all of the traffic needs to be mitigated. And I think we intend to do that, and that's why there's some proposals here for cyclists and pedestrian right below it. I just want to make sure that it's clear that all kinds of traffic need to be mitigated. And I'll work with Greg to add that in. And then on page 25, the last
actually,
part,
hold on a second. When we break into our groups, Carrie, Greg is going to go back to owning basically the South Palo Alto options. So
okay.
It's Dave who needs to note now.
Needs to know.
Suggesting.
I'll send it to him.
Yeah, but because of the Brown Act, because you're going to be in the different group, you need to send everything through Sarah, and she'll have to distribute to the whole group.
Well, this is the book meeting. I can send it to him during the meeting, right? I've got it all written up. So.
Sure, and then Sarah can make it public. Yeah, you just need to make sure the public is getting it also, right? Whatever you send to Dave.
Nadia, which group do I reattach to or attach to? Since Dave and I worked on the table of contents until today.
I think you have a choice, Phil, because Larry and I are both leaving the other groups, so you can go to whichever one needs you most.
Or
I'll let them battle it out for you.
If you think that would be the most useful. It's up to you.
All right, we can talk about it offline, I think.
We'll talk about it offline.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also I'm providing the public with these comments right now as well.
Okay.
So, and then page 25, the public opinion section there, this is just a little weird thing, and I don't know if it merits discussion, but I'll throw it out there. Community opinions originated strongly from, it doesn't make total sense to me.
Yeah.
Are you trying to say strong opinions from the community originated from these groups?
So my general thought, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. I think it's very dangerous to try to summarize public opinion. I think I think the comments that we got from everybody is basically going to be in the appendix. Every email that we got is going to be in there. And I, in some ways, would rather cut that section from both the Meadow Charleston and the Churchill sections, because I think for public opinion, you say, and the comments are in the appendix. And I think that's where we sort of leave that. Is the group okay with that? Because I feel like it's just too dangerous to try to summarize And what if another, and for example, yeah, I just think it's too hard.
Yeah, I think this would be much more useful if it was somehow quantified, and I don't think we can or are planning to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can originate strongly from, but I think strongly might go with opinions if we did keep it. So
Hey, Carrie, sorry about the word. I actually meant mainly, like from a quantity
that
standpoint. So I picked a poor choice of word as strong, because
No,
now
that
I
makes
see
so much
how,
more sense.
yeah, it should be like more mainly, or in quantity wise, they came mostly from here or something.
Well,
like
I'm
that.
sorry I didn't catch it in the previous version, so I wanted to bring it up because I was like, I'm not sure.
My
like, that might be-
apologies. Your poor word choice could be
No
better.
problem, no problem. That makes much more sense. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't
that can
think,
be changed.
do we have anything for public? I don't think we have anything for public opinion on the Meadow Charleston one, right, Greg? Or if we do, we have a single sentence probably.
Yeah, I mean, again, I originally had a section and I started putting in parts, and some of the pros and cons were like, well, people really complained a lot about this one. And you correctly pointed out that public opinion is hard to, originally I had a section where I included the charts from the virtual town hall.
Yeah, and I think we should strip all of that out. I think the even the summary of the town hall, like that was the city's party and not ours. We didn't throw that party, and so they'll summarize that in their own work. I just think anything that is us trying to summarize public opinion is dangerous.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that all the people who spoke to us who feel strongly will speak again to council when they make
Exactly.
I'll go with your gut on that one. Okay, thank you. That was it for my comments. I'll send those over to you, Dave, and CC.
Okay. Greg, you had noted there was some other substantive things.
I just want to know if there are other, I'm trying to remember if there are other, one of the things I changed, if I go back, was, yeah, in the, when we got to the compared, oh no, okay, hold on, sorry. When we got to the council adopted criteria, I changed a few things because to make it more like the other section, I made this section more neutral. Originally, this was in a majority opinion advocacy document. So for instance, where we said the impact is turnoff on pedestrian bike traffic is problematic and the undercrossing is long and awkward, I thought, okay, that's not, this is the neutral section. We're going to describe what's going to happen. We're going to describe what's going to happen, like where we said these can be successfully mitigation. So, I just, a few small changes to kind of make this a little bit less, to make it a little more neutral. And in fact, that first sentence about how everything was awkward, to me, we have time later in the report to advocate for, why things are awkward. We do have also the continued rail operations and Caltrain service improvements. My legalistic rendering of this section from the council was, how do we support Caltrain when we're done? And a number of the documents have described how will it affect Caltrain during construction. So, and one thing here, we had a long discussion last week about this sentence about the shoe fly track. I'd be happy to just take it out because it's got nothing to do with any of this section of the rest of supporting Caltrain service improvements.
I did want to note, I requested from Ripon. So when the technical advisory committee was set up and we were looking at working on the new alternatives, the staff had shared with the technical advisory committee some the roll up of basically the underpinnings of the cost estimates, basically. So on the matrix and whatever, when it says between 300 and 450 million or whatever, there was a more detailed document that had that. So in Ripon's presentation today, when he answered the question of it's $550 a square foot plus blah, 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 it came from that document. So we already have it for the existing alternatives. I've just asked Ripon to get us the ones for the new alternatives, and that will all the cost stuff will also be put in the appendix. So Dave, when you're asking what other appendix things there's going to be a more detailed preliminary cost estimates that is essentially the roll up of how they got the numbers that appear on the fact sheets.
Yeah, besides, Nadia, based on Ripon's numbers, the cost of the shoe fly tracks is negligible.
So so
let's just take it out.
I don't think we need to discuss the shoe fly track in this section at all.
Agreed.
I agree with you.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Agreed. Take it out.
Another substantial change that I think Nadia and I both made was to the rail noise and vibration section.
Yes.
So I think it originally said the viaduct's going to be a lot noisier,
Yes.
and we don't have a noise study that says that.
Exactly. Yeah. The
So-
information was incorrect.
So this is sort of a more based on the noise report. And in fact, I even put a quote in from the noise report, which maybe we should include somewhere else, but where basically the noise report person said, yes, everyone knows the 3 decibels is doubling the sound level. Most people don't notice the difference. They notice 5 decibels and they really notice 10 decibels.
Right.
And like maybe that's what should go in that section 8 from the other report on noise, just to say overview on noise.
Yeah.
And let's see, what else? I think that was the main things that changed, other than moving those 2
Oh,
sections.
hold on, wait, scroll back for a
Sorry,
second. There was
okay.
one where there's 3 different colored here. Let's stop there.
Oh yeah, there's this one. This was the
Yeah,
whole, again.
So this is,
Oh yes, the viaduct option is more expensive to maintain. Yes.
right. So this is what prompted me to ask, which is what Ripon clarified earlier during the staff update, that they're going to tweak the matrix to make sure that because it's not reflected well in the matrix. And so that's
Yeah.
what that comes from.
Okay. So these are all good things for Dave to work on in the next couple of weeks. This is awesome. Oh look, we spelled mitigations wrong.
Yeah. Hold on. Stop there for a second. This is, let's see. I realized this copied from the fact sheets.
Yeah.
Missing construction impacts. Yeah, so I didn't feel like I wasn't sure about the construction impacts, and this isn't a comment on Dave's work. It's just, I don't know that we got any information about, like, when they have to make the changes on Oregon Expressway, what are the impacts to Oregon Expressway and how long do those go on for? So I think that the fact sheets in some ways talk about the biggest mitigations, but don't really explain a bunch of other mitigations. And it may not matter, right? It may be inconsequential, and that's why it wasn't included, because the matrix they tried to make pretty and make it just readable. But I just realized that as I'm thinking about that and trying to describe that to others, I thought that was missing. And it's this next section on right-of-way impact, which is the one that prompted them clarifying that stuff on the matrix. So.
Okay, cool. And where else do we have? I'm trying to just look down for other areas of pink here, which there was not a huge amount. And then the summary of the majority opinion, again, I changed this to be like, now that we've described the alternative and we've had a fairly neutral description of the city council adopted criteria, now 6 XCAP members voted, because that's true compared to the South Palo Alto, and
right.
then, kind of what we said.
And I just want to encourage Dave and your team, as you go through this, you've seen what the dissenting opinion is, right? So if there's something that you would have rebutted or whatever, this is the section where you'd want to add in your sentences so that you're covering it before they get to the dissenting opinion. Does that make sense?
And that's about it. I changed it. I mean, yeah. Let's see where else. All right. And the minority opinion, maybe we take this out.
I think you can leave it as a placeholder for right now, because I'm leaving it as a separate document so I can continue to work on it, and then we can do rounds of edits, because once it goes in here, it becomes locked into whatever this group is doing.
Yeah. And then there was a section where, it says, there was interest in a whole completely different viaduct proposal, which to me felt like, yet another proposal for this whole thing. And maybe we don't want to get into that.
That's Tony's thing. And so
Tony told us it's not his thing.
Well, Tony said it's not his thing and then changed his mind. So Tony, you need to be clear with us what you want to do about this.
No, let me be clear. I think this describes, it's a different place that it was written. What I think is a good idea is to have a Homer-like underpass, which allows for about an 8-foot rise in the tracks at Churchill, and then continue to rise because it allows for existing access from the Palo Alto School District to be accessed further on up under the viaduct. And that's it was described somewhere else as an 8-foot elevation over Churchill.
It's right here. It's on the screen, Tony.
It is.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to read. Sorry, I put my mouse in the wrong place.
Sorry. Yeah,
I think
that's where I think that's was the idea that we had that was part of a discarded option, which was the Embarcadero roundabout with a viaduct on top. And I think that's part of our study area, and I think we need to say something about it. It's a complicated area. We need to address it because it's part of our, within our territory.
Now, hold on. Now you've lost me. So this document and this part is summarizing what people were voting on. And at one point you were the only one interested in looking in supporting a viaduct, but not any of the viaducts that the staff had given us. You had a different viaduct. And that's what this paragraph.
It's not a viaduct, it's a berm, if you want to call it, because it doesn't, a berm with a bridge over Churchill.
It's technically but it's a hybrid.
If you want to call it a viaduct, you can call it, but technically it's not a viaduct.
Well, so what should we call it? Because we have to put something in there. So Tony, I need you to write if you can, I know you're really busy, but if you can figure out and write whatever you want this to say, because it represents I see this as a minority opinion, right? So this is your section to kind of try to describe what you were saying.
Okay, I think I did. I sent it to Dave, but I can resend it.
But it's got to have enough detail that a member of the public who's never seen this before understands what you're saying. So just make sure that you then have somebody else in your family or something read it and see if they understand what you're saying. You know what I mean? Like do a sanity check with someone.
Can I add the graphic that we sent to council with the roundabout?
Well, but this is not. The roundabout alternative was something that we brought to city council and then they decided not to pursue. So that's not in this part of this report.
That's not part of the discarded alternative?
That's in a different section. That's not part of this. And we're not putting that in the report per se. We make mention of it, but it's not in this. It can be in the appendix, right? Yeah. But it's not going to be in this part. This part was when we were voting between, do you want a closure, a viaduct, or a partial underpass? Your initial thing was, well, I want a viaduct. My first choice is a viaduct, but not the one that the city has proposed. I have a different idea.
Right.
And that's what this is. But that's not the same as at the time, it didn't sound like the same thing as the Embarcadero roundabout thing that you had proposed.
They go together, but if you want to separate them, I don't know how you separate them, but you can.
It seems like to me, we can't title this section viaduct because now we're finding out that it isn't the viaduct that we voted against in this decision. It's something else. And
yeah, this is like an alternate proposal.
And I think with all due respect, Tony, I think because it was just you, I think if you, for the sake of the clarity of the report, if you wanted to have something in the appendix about what you like the most, we could put something there, but I'm not sure it warrants just because it doesn't follow any of the patterns that like your vote was basically a vote for something that wasn't actually on the table. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I think we should take it out of here and put it in the appendix as you suggested.
Okay, great. And so I'll just need you to write a blurb and then we can attach it with the other pictures or whatever you want to do. But you'll have to write that section of the appendix for me.
I'll do that.
Great, awesome. Okay, so that clears that up. Great, we just got rid of a paragraph.
Okay. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to call people's attention to with this doc.
Great.
So I'm
going through it, there's one thing that's been used throughout, which I have a problem with, and that is where we say here and elsewhere, see the fact sheets for more information. And I'm troubled by that because I do not want the reader to have to flip back and forth. So I think that if there's more information that we think that the reader ought to have here, that we ought to put it in. And maybe we have one generalized statement at the start or somewhere that says there's a lot more information on these fact sheets, which are contained in that page, whatever, in the appendix.
Yeah, so I think in my edits, I basically went through and and wrote out in words everything that appears on those fact sheets so that you don't really have to reference them. And my thinking, and I think which is kind of part of the discussion we were having before about the problem of inserting these graphics from a size perspective, is that I think at the beginning of the section, when you talk about a viaduct, we have to insert the matrix, the pictures of the viaduct and the fact sheet for the viaduct right there, so that the reader is not flipping to the appendix each time to see what a picture of the viaduct looks like. And I think that what we've edited so far has probably remove the need to say, see the fact sheets for more information, because there shouldn't be any extra information that isn't now in words in the report. But we might want to do a sanity check on that. But I agree with you, Larry. Greg, I think your edits were similar, right? We basically went through the matrix and made sure that anything that was written in the matrix in words, we've now put in there in words, right?
Yeah, and summarized in some cases, but yes.
Yeah, but there was one or two references, or at least one anyway, in the section that said.
Yeah, we should be able to take those out. Yeah. Okay. Great. Do we want to look at Meadow Charleston?
Sure.
And whoever wants to drive on that document would be great.
I'll do it. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right, I don't have much. I chose to leave it mostly alone. I chose, so starting off, I chose summary of actions instead of exec summary.
Yep, great.
To differentiate. Then let's see. I left your comment, the previous comments in here. Did you want to talk through any of these here, or?
So I think the challenge is that the figures use the word sound wall barrier, and then the noise report calls it a noise parapet. And Greg's point was, let's just pick something and go with it. And I think we may have to solve this problem in the glossary, where we kind of explain all of those things in the glossary, because they all the same. Greg, could you mute? I think it's on your side.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's
okay. Thank you.
I think parapet is more accurate, but I think most people don't know what a parapet is.
Right.
But the sound wall sounds like it could be 12 feet tall, and it's only 6 feet tall, and so it's going to be different take.
Well,
so
yeah,
and especially I'd like to note, to Greg's point, especially since the sound walls along US 101 seem to be about 10 or 12 feet tall.
Yeah, and so this one, so I think I'll try to make multiple entries in the noise. In the key terms glossary section, to be able to make sure that that's addressed. But that's basically what we're fighting here. The other thing is that initially we had been told, so I was always left with the image that the noise from a train comes from the wheels. And so these were low walls. And I'm now recognizing that for engineers who are building things that are 50 feet high, 6 feet is a low wall. But I think for the average person, if you said, we're going to close the tracks at Churchill and we're going to put a low sound wall, and it was 6 feet tall, they would think that that's rather high. I think that a low wall to them is something much lower than that. But I don't know if that's just my impression or if anybody else felt that way. I mean, to me, a 6 foot wall is a wall.
Yeah, but what's a parapet? How tall is a parapet?
They're all 6 feet. The noise parapet is the 6
No,
foot.
I know that, but does the average lay reader know that the parapet is 6 feet tall?
They will if they read our key terms and glossary section.
Okay, so it seems to me we're kind of dancing around this. We should just say 6 foot wall, sound wall, otherwise known as a parapet.
Yeah.
Nadia, I would suggest using the word sound barrier, because the technology is changing quickly and there are several ways to mitigate those sounds. So I wouldn't call it either wall or parapet. I'd say a barrier.
Okay, well, and the document, as you can see, the picture there says 6 foot sound wall barrier to add to the confusion.
Maybe we could say sound wall barrier parapet, and that'll just cover all.
Exactly, that we've got them all.
This is simple wordsmith.
Yeah, we'll figure this part out. So you can scroll.
This should not be our hardest problem to solve.
Yeah.
So this part about the fencing around the trench, Keith, it requires higher fences than we have today at the point where the trench has to dip down, because there's bigger danger because as the wires are going down, the fence has to be higher to protect being able to get to that point, is what I recalled. Does that sound right to you, Phil?
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, that's a pretty significant risk. So you definitely want to fence that off.
Yeah.
Because touching those wires is instant electrocution.
But getting hit by a train is instant death too.
Sure.
Sure, but
So,
but you know, there were routine accidents along the Northeast corridor where people hit the they have the similar OCS, and every so often somebody just electrocutes themselves. Now they have to really climb towers to do that, but it doesn't stop people.
so I envision that you would have just the whole area, like all along Alma, you'd have your 8 or whatever size wall fence there, and you would enclose the whole area so you couldn't get in.
yeah, that's what it has. But in the areas where the trench is dipping down, the fence gets higher there. So there is a segment where the fence is higher than the rest of the corridor.
But that would presumably be a clear mesh fence, not a
Exactly,
solid
yeah.
wall.
Mm-hmm.
Still, it is a visual impact, and we ought to identify it.
Yep.
But is that fence go around that area? I don't understand
There's
how
fencing
this.
there's fencing on both sides. They're 12 feet. And when you get to the part where the trench is dipping down, my understanding is the fence, I'm going to make up a number. The fence goes from being 12 feet high to being 18 feet high until the train has descended into the trench deep enough where it can taper back down.
What prevents someone from climbing the short fence and then walking up to the?
It's not
Nothing.
what they're preventing. Yeah, nothing. What they're preventing is if the fence stayed 12 feet at the point where the train is, let's say, halfway submerged into the trench, the wires, if you climb the 12-foot fence and reached over, you might be able to touch the wires. And so they're trying to make it so that the clearance is higher. That's how I understand. I could be wrong, but that's how I
So,
understood.
Keith, all these fences do is prevent casual suicides or maybe people from falling in. If somebody's determined to have suicide by electrocution, they'll find a way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a toaster in a bathtub. You got it.
I don't actually know. And this might be you can go to the VR Palo Alto, but you might. I wonder if in the video it's visible.
Where was this described? I missed this. Where they describe the fencing.
I don't. It's been a while, so it was when we
Okay.
first started talking about trenches. But I can't say where I remember that it goes. But that was what I remember. And we could have maybe actually. Well, I don't want to tell Ripon to ask at Ecom because it costs us money each time.
No, again, this is one of these things that really doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
People who hate the trench do not hate it because of the 12-foot fence.
Exactly. If the fence is slightly higher, they're okay with that too.
Yeah, I'm happy to just leave it the way it is. Yeah, and I'm trying to keep these sections short.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree, but I was just curious because I'd never heard of it. But
Okay, any more on this one? No?
I don't think so.
Okay. Oops. Oh, no discussion.
No, that's just
Yeah,
where
okay.
that section is right now.
I just added this section on traffic studies and copy pasted some tables in here.
Great. So it matches what yours had.
Yeah, just whatever Churchill is in, and then I just
I might suggest moving this section because the previous section was city council criteria in order. And then there were two categories of city council criteria. There was the first category and the second category.
Right.
So now we're putting traffic considerations in the middle of them. So I just might flip that and maybe even move it down even further. But that we can talk about later.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think the substance that Dave added is good. I think the location may need to just
we might just
based on your table of contents.
So right now it's here 3.2. You see the 3.1.
Yeah. So this is and this is probably an error in the way that the numbering is done on my part, but 3.1 is the city council adopted criteria, but 3.3 is the second half of the city council adopted criteria because their criteria comes in two sections.
Right.
Yeah. So on your section, Dave, it comes right after additional.
Oh, you guys moved it after additional. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
There was something I noticed that I had a controversy with not that's done in 3.2. Okay.
This one.
Yeah. Oh, there. Oh, here it is. Okay. So Nadia said if they don't let us put the viaduct. One of the advantages of the viaduct is that, as currently designed, it is farther from the homes than the current tracks. And Nadia says, well, what if Caltrain doesn't let us? And my answer would be, well, what if Caltrain doesn't let us do anything? How is this Caltrain not letting us different from all the other Caltrains not letting us?
Yeah. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
what I worry about is that this is an attractive feature of the viaduct. And so on the other things, like, yes, but what if they don't let us do anything? But in this case, people prefer this because of that feature that that is not guaranteed.
Dave, to try to answer you, Greg, try to answer your point in part. Caltrain may say we want to maintain the option for a future 4-track system.
But then we have to open up that can of worms for all of the alternatives, and we
No, I
agree
know,
with
but
Violet not to do that.
by leaving by replacing. Okay, let me start over. If you're shifting the alignment of the tracks, as opposed to simply keeping the alignment, the horizontal alignment, but just changing the vertical alignment, those are two different situations. So Caltrain may say, fine, leave the horizontal alignment where it is, and we're happy. Change the horizontal alignment, we are not happy. No, I don't have any specific knowledge here. I'm just
I
pointing
have an
out
idea.
the difference here.
Would it be better to move this? We have this currently under viaduct disadvantages, but if we moved it into the advantages section, like, hey, it moves away from the tracks and people might like that better. And then simply note that we're actually not sure whether that's possible.
Subject to Caltrain approval. And also I'm also harping on this because we've talked about it a couple of times, and you specifically asked the Caltrain rep if this was going to be a problem that the track curves, and he says, no, there are no design standards about that.
Right. Well, what he said was nuanced, which is they have designed the track curvature according to the technical things, but they have not asked Caltrain and High Speed Rail whether introducing a new change in the direction of the way the tracks swing has a problem for their operations. And those are two different things. So I'm perfectly fine moving this into an advantage and just like changing the wording. I just want to note that this is not a for sure. It seems to be a potential advantage right now, but it's questionable, right? Like, I think that's the most significant thing about it. Then we had a section, if you want to keep scrolling, groundwater section, I think, unless you have some, Dave.
No, these are just all minor edits.
Yeah, the groundwater section. And Keith and I think, went back and forth in this. Keith, I don't know if you had a chance to look at this again.
Yeah. So the first one, I cleaned that up a little to be more specific.
Great.
So the first bullet is just talking about that you can seal it. And Carlsbad talks about this in their documentation, and they specified 3 techniques that met their criteria for sealing and had the 4 others that did not.
Okay.
So the point I want to make there is not every construction technique seals the trench. So, and then the other issue is that, well, even if you have a perfectly sealed trench, you're still not leaving the groundwater alone. It's not leaking into the trench, but you're changing the way that the groundwater flows underground. And so that the Carlsbad, again, I cite that they did this big trench study where they modeled the groundwater flow and took data where the existing height of the groundwater was, and then said how much would this 50-foot trench, they used a 50-foot uniform trench as opposed to one that slanted up at the end, how much would this change the groundwater? And some spots it raised it by 4 feet, but I think it was 20 feet underground at that point. So 20 feet to 16 feet is not that big a change, but it's a change.
And I just want to point out, Keith and I we had this conversation about, is this so technical that it goes into a technical part of the report? And Keith made what I think is a valid argument, which is that there's so much interest in the trench that it is important to really try to give as much meat in the report as to why the engineering challenges remain and what you know, like what they, the magnitude of what they are, right? And so in some ways it's a lot of detail, but because it's such a popular alternative, I feel like it's okay that that's included in there. Keith, it also occurred to me that I think it was a comment that the Save the Groundwater folks made. Part of the impacts of global warming is actually that groundwater moves closer to the surface. And so that actually could be a problem over time for all the alternatives. And I don't know if, I mean, I'm not saying we have to put that in the report, but I just wanted to point that out to you.
Yeah. I mean, this is area, I think it's achievable. I think the issue that the groundwater people talked about was the fact that in the Bay Area, you have this stratified soil where you have layers of sand and layers of clay. And so now as it's going along, it's hard to move up and down. It moves very slowly up and down. So if you know that, you certainly could have something near the trench that allowed it to move up and down easier and you'd have less of an impact. But I mean, I would want a groundwater engineer to look at that and not just some layman looking at this. So, but anyway, the problem I have with the trench is that I really think AECOM dismissed it and didn't give it a fair shake. But on the other hand, my neighbors are looking at it and I think they're looking through rose-colored glasses at it. And the truth is somewhere in between. The problem is it closer to AECOM's pessimistic view? Is it closer to my neighbor's positive view? I don't know. We need more analysis to tell that. So that's why I want to make just full disclosure of all the things that could go wrong if you're looking at this.
Yep. Anybody else have anything on that?
Can we delete this section? Because it doesn't make any interest to its detail.
No, my vote is to keep it for what I just explained. I mean, we can certainly ask people, but I think to explain what are the engineering challenges.
I make a motion to delete this section.
Okay. Do we have a second? No second.
Can I speak to? Oh, it doesn't have a second.
Nope.
Okay.
I'm very positive towards the trench. I think it's gotten a bad rap. I think this is important to be fair and to say these are challenges. And I think at the beginning, I think it says, okay, maybe that first sentence could be cleaned up to be a little. So if you look at trench engineering challenges, that right there, 3.4, maybe we should change that first sentence to be a little more like these aren't necessarily, these won't necessarily kill the trench, but these are areas that need to be worked on or be examined.
This is, doesn't this almost cry out for saying area of further study?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's really what this is.
Yeah.
This is really an area of further study.
Yeah, by the way, the ex-civil engineer in me would side more to the pessimistic AECOM view because groundwater is a nasty issue to deal with, particularly when you've got clay involved.
I think if anything kills the trench, in my opinion, it's going to be the creeks. I think groundwater is something that we can work with.
Well, I mean water generally, groundwater, creeks, and just general water table.
Well,
because right now at San Antonio, you know, where the what was that little grocery store there, the cheese shop?
Milk Pail?
They're building a new building there. The basement will go 5 stories, or no, it'll go 5 stories underground with parking.
5 stories? Wow.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Underground?
No, 4 stories underground.
Where?
And so if you average 12 feet per story, that's about 50 feet right there. So that's going to be deeper than our trench. And that connects to the existing building, which has the same 4 stories underground. They had the paper had plans of it. And so I think if that can survive the groundwater, the trench will have a small impact. But crossing through those creeks, that could be the Achilles heel.
Yeah, Keith, I'll just say this, that a building is a relatively small amount of footprint, so to speak, so the water can sort of flow around it. Whereas we're talking about the equivalent of a wall.
Yeah, but you mean you start looking at the length from San Antonio over to Showers Drive, that's a pretty long distance, right?
All right.
So
Again, further study.
yeah, I
I
think,
don't think we can decide this.
Keith,
Attempt to.
Keith, you're going to get another bite of the apple here to finish cleaning this up. So I think you can do
Okay.
some more magic in there.
Can I weigh in, Nadia?
I have a
Yeah,
question.
Tony.
I just
You started to make some reference to some sentence that you might want changed, and you said it's the fourth something or other under section 3.4.7, and I'm not clear what
Okay.
you're referring to.
Okay, so it's up on the screen. Don't touch your screen, Nadia. Where the heading says trench engineering challenges. That sentence right after
Right.
that,
That's what I'm looking at.
where it says where a trench design involves significant engineering challenges. The term challenge can mean different things to different people. So I wanted to say that I want to clarify that by saying this is areas that need more study and more work. They aren't necessarily insurmountable, but they aren't necessarily achievable. Something like that.
So if Keith is on the South Palo Alto team for the next go round, when I share the doc,
Yes.
the new copy of the doc, which will be draft E, I guess, you can make that change.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Tony, you wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to say, give you some history. This trench has been a favorite in Palo Alto for a number of people for over 10 years. And so I agree with Keith that we need to put this up front rather than in an appendix, but I think we voted on that or didn't vote on it.
Yeah. I would also say, Keith and Tony, if you have any interest, to me, the project that probably holds the most relevant information is whatever the Stanford medical buildings are that are being built in Menlo Park, between where the old car dealerships used to be, basically between the Stanford Hotel all the way to basically where Bevmo is, or the sports thing. That is deep and about the longest thing we have that is immediately adjacent to the right of way. I don't know what the groundwater is relative to how it is further south in Palo Alto, because Palo Alto does pitch downwards as you get further south. But that I'd be curious, that there might be some information there.
Yeah, Nadia, did you say those are Stanford University, Stanford Med buildings?
I think it's Stanford's, some medical buildings that Stanford is building there. I believe. I may be wrong, but it's basically where it's across from Middle Avenue, right? And
yeah, I'm familiar with all. Where I bought a car once a long time ago.
All right.
Hey,
Okay.
Just so I'm clear, and to In Young's motion, which I assume isn't moving forward, but are we going to take this section and put it in a future kind of directions thing? I just want to be clear on that.
Well,
this is supposed to make sure that, okay, sorry, I didn't know if it's muted or not. This is meant to talk about the general topic. Then I have specific questions that I'm asking the consultants, and I'll when I edit this, I'll make sure that this is consistent, but this is meant to be like the background information, but I didn't want to include all this, because some of this is more detailed than they need, and that make the questions more direct.
But I do want to say that from a format to Dave's question, we have like hybrid advantage, disadvantage, trench advantage, disadvantage, and then trench is the only one that has engineering challenges.
Right.
And so question about whether this is the right spot. I think when we take another closer look at this, now that we've figured out the table of contents, we can figure out where this lives.
Okay, so I have a question. So engineering challenges. So what does it really impact this one? Is it going to cost more? Is it going to be not solvable? What is the impact? It's the most important thing. I don't care if it's 2%, 3%, 10%, 50 feet or 30 feet. You know, I don't even frankly believe what he's saying all these things, because he doesn't have credentials, right? So now, you know, what is the impact on the decision maker for all these engineering challenges? That's the most important thing. And I don't see any of it. It's just, you guys just argue with 3 feet, you know.
Well, I think well, Keith, I'll let you respond first.
I guess my question for In Young would be, are you concerned that this is making the trench look less appealing? Is that your concern?
I'm not concerned anything about appealing or not appealing. I just read this, it's like, doesn't do anything for me.
But is that because you already have decided that your trench is your
No,
favorite?
no.
option, or-
I'm for trench, but whether it's a trench or not, so engineering challenges, if what you narrated here is it's a challenge. Any decision we make, there will be a challenge. There will be money involved. How much is it going to be? Like, we're not designing it, right? So there's a big challenge about this thing, but we don't have to go into these details. I think impact is, that's all I'm
I
saying.
think we do be. No, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm sorry. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, but I think we have to say about this because for no other reason that AECOM didn't address these. This is why we're talking about it still. And so we basically are telling AECOM, or the next, whoever does any future analysis is like, these are issues that need to be addressed properly.
So there might be a way to state these more succinctly, because this is a lot of information. So I think what you're saying is we would like to figure out if the trench is easier to construct with a steeper grade, figure out if the trench is steeper to construct if it's shallower, and study the water table. I mean, that's basically what we're saying. This is kind of like, the gory details an engineer might need to understand what they're studying.
Yeah, no, but that's why I broke it up in two portions, because I thought just those specific questions won't tell the general public. This is for the general public. Tell them what's the context. Why are we asking these specific questions? Because they may say, why are you asking these questions? I don't have any context. This is the context for that.
So maybe we could clarify that this week or next week or whenever we do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should work on it.
Why is this information here? And put it in the right section.
Yeah, and it might be that the more technically stuff goes into the technical recommendations, Keith, but your general, like, there may be things that we could speak of more generally and then figured out how to weave it into advantages and disadvantages or unknowns, if that's going to be a thing, right? And then maybe move the technical mumbo jumbo stuff into something but I do think it's important. I hear what you're saying. We'll work on it.
Okay, let me scrub on this and we can.
Yeah.
So are we going to go through all the sections? Because we have hopefully not much more than a half an hour left.
No,
I'm starting to imagine what work might need to be done on this doc, but we need to discuss it.
I think.
Yeah, and I'd like to suggest that we have some discussion about how we're going to utilize the 3 weeks break.
Yeah. So you can scroll through. I don't think much more. This is the same.
Yeah,
thing.
I don't really want to discuss comments, honestly, right now.
Okay.
What I do want to discuss is structure of this. We made some sort of high-level statements earlier in this meeting about the need to change the structure. So specifically, is it possible to open the little thingy that I'm pointing my mouse to that you can't see on the upper left-hand corner that looks like three lines with 3 dots next to them? So I think, for instance, are we going to take out the public opinion section?
Yes.
Okay, I'm actually going to find a way.
Can I ask a question about that before we say yes?
Sure, Phil.
We have statistics in the virtual town hall.
Yes, but I think what the point was that was work done by the city council, by the city staff, and they have their own report that they're doing on the virtual town hall where they've summarized all of that. So it's not necessary for us to do it again.
All right, that's fine. I just want to cover
that.
Yeah. All right, I'm good.
Okay, we're going to take that out. I'm taking this for myself.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, I do not propose that we independently analyze all those emails.
No.
I think someone should.
Yeah, as long as that someone is not me, I'm fine with that. Greg.
And let's see. And then what other going up? Actually, I don't think the structure needs to change drastically, except for the bottom. I think it's the stuff at the bottom that I'm confused about.
Yeah.
So the additional considerations. Yeah.
8.4 is going away. That's going to go into the appendix, and I will work on that and bring back something, right?
Okay.
We had the additional considerations is basically stuff that doesn't fit neatly into any of these other things. So I propose that the groundwater creek information, I thought it might be easiest. Can you click on that 8.3, Dave? It's Dave driving, yes? Yes.
Yeah.
I propose that in this section, we simply talk about the fact that anything that deals with groundwater in creeks has to go through all those different agencies that I sent the email to all of you, which is also in Joe Teresa's email. And then we can say we got this really good technical description of issues with the creeks and groundwater that can be viewed in the appendix. And that's it. I don't think this needs to necessarily be in the body of the report, unless anyone feels really strongly that
Yeah.
they need to understand those things.
So when we say move it to the appendix, does that mean that someone other than me is going to literally cut and paste this into something called an appendix?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Similarly, I think 8.2 should probably, the quiet zone stuff, really nothing to do with Meadow and Charleston.
Yep. Agreed.
So I would almost like to
Agreed.
move that somewhere.
Yep.
Appendix.
Yep.
Are going to be our solution to everything. Parking lot. And the noise section, I think the noise section might be helpful, but maybe that's an appendix. Maybe there's a noise appendix that includes the language that I cut and paste into the other doc about 3 decibels versus 5 decibels versus 10 decibels.
I think the public is really not misinformed, but needs this information to be convinced of various opinions that float around in the community about noise. So I'd leave it in here, but
Okay.
I agree with Tony.
Okay, I'll leave it in, and I might even enhance it a bit. Other than that, going up, I mean, I think the overall structure, I understand in Young's comments about the gory details of trench engineering that we have to find a way to explain why they're in here or move them even lower. Oh, and then there are some dead sections, considerations for freight we're just going to take out.
Yes, exactly.
Let's actually look at, and that's actually, yeah, I'd rather just like take out. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I have no problem with that. Again,
And
this
then
is
if we go to number 6, priority areas for
About
future.
considerations for freight,
Yeah.
that issue may come up.
but that issue is covered in the community context, what we've now dubbed influencing factors. We have a thing about
All right.
freight in
Yeah,
there.
we shouldn't just throw that information away.
We have, it's the third, we have council criteria, eminent domain and property acquisition and freight. So we have stuff about freight in there and we
All
talk
right,
about
okay.
the need for that.
So
And
maybe
I,
we need to move that around, but I wouldn't just throw that in. I wouldn't throw away all that prose without checking the other section.
I agree. You
I'll
just
cut
wanna
it out
make-
and email it to Nadia.
Appendix.
Well, so hold on a second. The freight thing is already, I think, captured in the on the matrix. On the city council criteria. One of the things is Caltrain exceptions needed, and that's where we talk about the % grade.
Well, okay, there's grade and there's continuing operation of freight.
Right, but the continuing
just-
operation of freight is covered in the discussions about passing
yeah.
tracks. And then the % grade is covered in the additional considerations on the of each section. So I think that this should be repetitive. Just flag
right,
it,
if it's-
Greg,
if
and
it's-
verify it, but I think just for the
Yeah.
sake of simplicity.
I've got notes.
Yeah, the reason I'm mentioning, some people say, why don't we just get rid of the freight? And that's just
Yeah,
not
and
realistic.
I think we covered you can't get rid of freight in the community context at the very beginning of
All
the
right,
report.
okay, thank you.
And then I agree on taking out number 5, additional comparisons. We didn't have any. That was just a
Right.
place.
And then the 6, the priority areas for future study, some of that is what Keith is, I'm wondering how repetitive this section is.
Well, that's why this is where I think is the best candidate for where Keith's stuff may go.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, so
okay.
I guess, can I ask a question about this? If we have separate Meadow Charleston sections for all the other issues, why not have the areas for future study specific to each of the crossing areas?
So what we did was we have areas of future study from a policymaker level, which was, hey, you should review the bike ped plan, and hey, you should work with Caltrain. And then we have the areas of future study in the 2 big major sections, one for Churchill, one for Meadow Charleston, that then goes into all the technical stuff for those. And some of them
So really we're dividing this up. Let me clarify, because I think we're onto something. We're talking about, on the one hand, policy issues, and the other hand, technical and engineering issues.
yes.
Okay, as long as we're clear on that.
Yes,
Okay,
and then
thank
we
you.
have also some technical engineering issues which overlap both on Churchill and South Palo Alto, like geotechnical studies. And then some that are specific to, for
Yeah,
example,
but-
only the South Palo Alto underpass.
But that's so small that that slight amount of repetition wouldn't hurt in
Agreed.
the service of keeping everything about Meadow Charleston or Churchill in one large chapter.
Yep.
Nadia?
Yeah.
There's one other suggestion, and I don't know how everyone feels about this, but I think we need to flag that we should look at the design aspects of urban design, landscaping, the ground plane, the feel and look of the ground plane and compatibility with Palo Alto.
Yeah. So that we put into, I'm realizing I don't think it's in the table of contents. In the table of contents document, Dave, where did you grab that from? What I had created last week, right?
I'm sorry, which table of contents?
Sorry, if you can look at the table of contents document and go to the very beginning of it. It starts with glossary. And then see recommendations for policymakers. That document, where did you grab that from?
I saw that.
This is from last week's document.
Yeah. And so Tony, in there you see under technical recommendations, urban designer. So you have recommendations for policymakers, 1 through 7, then technical recommendations, and we have noise and vibration, and then urban designer.
I saw that. Thank you.
Okay, so it's in there. And this, by the way, is one of those sections that it's basically, we have to figure out whether this goes in the beginning or we're going to move it somewhere else, right? Because this is the part that's getting both technical and policymaker stuff together. So, all right, let's go back to Greg. You were going through the rest of this.
I was just thinking about the priority areas for future studies, specific study areas. I think actually it's okay. We can make this work.
Okay.
Okay.
So Dave, do you want to go through yours and make sure you're clear? Because I think there's more from the South Palo Alto thing that's being, that structure is informing your section a little bit more.
Did you mean Churchill or this one? This is
I
my
think
section right now.
Sorry, I meant, I think this format of the South Palo Alto alternatives and the table of contents sort of stuff is informing what parallel changes need to be made to the Churchill document. Is that
Okay? Yeah, I got that.
okay?
And so what did you want to?
I just wanted to be sure. Do you have any? Is there any questions that's come up for you as a result of this conversation, or you're kind of clear on it?
Well, given that you had taken it, and I think you had pretty much shaped it into a lot of what's happening here.
Mm-hmm. You may be close already.
I'm pretty, I think close. There's some titling and stuff that I'd probably want to change, but
I think the media
and a few
thing
little
is,
details I have notes down here, but
okay.
But I think
I
I'm
think
okay.
the formatting the organization really makes a lot of sense for Churchill. I don't see any need for dramatic changes. Well, I have a suggestion for Keith. Maybe when we get down to additional technical studies, I think that if we had a paragraph that started out by saying AECOM has answered some of these questions in the negative, but panel member Reckdahl has done some independent research, which indicates that there's questions about the validity of the AECOM results, and that therefore additional research should be done on, then that's a lead into the questions and the analysis that you have. I think that having that background as to why, in this case, in almost all the other cases, we're accepting the opinions of AECOM, or most saying we accept them, but more work's needed. Here, we're really be challenging AECOM's conclusions.
Yeah.
How do you think about that?
Oh, Keith, I think you're muted.
Yes, this is the first time I've Zoomed on the phone, so I'm getting a learning curve. Yeah, I could put something like that. I don't want to make it look like I'm blowing my own horn, but also puts it in context, like why are we doing this? And some of the stuff, like for example, the overhead struts, AECOM just didn't even look at that, and we went back and asked them to clarify. They refused, so I think it's out of their skill set. So yeah, I'll put that in context.
Okay.
I did want to say, Larry, I think the only major difference between Greg's table of contents and Dave's table of contents is the detailed comparison of the options, right? That was, I think, the only difference. And so we agreed that I think Greg's basically explained that his edits kind of already achieved that. So hopefully it's already lined up. But I think that was really the main thing.
We still haven't figured out how to include safety and where safety goes.
So I see safety as if I'm looking back at the table of contents, I think after under additional considerations, we right now have noise, FRA quiet zones, and creek impacts. I think before that section, we could have the safety section, right? So instead we have future areas of study, but then before we get to any additional considerations, because all that stuff, did we just stick that in the appendix? I've gotten myself lost now.
You got me lost too.
Yeah, where were you saying?
Scroll towards the end.
End, okay.
Document or end of this. Keep going. Oh, let's go back. Yeah. So we have scroll a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Because everything in 8 other than noise is moving to the appendix.
Right.
Well,
so,
maybe this might be better to look at because I took all today's stuff and put it in this one.
Yeah. So the question is, is there a chapter? Does safety go right after noise as its own big chapter, not as a subheading?
Yeah, I think that's the right place for it.
Yeah.
And it deserves a lot of discussion. It's sort of, they're going to be unbalanced because I don't think we're going to be writing more than a page on noise unless, and we're going to be writing, well, I don't know how many pages on safety.
Safety is like 3 or 4. I don't remember. Maybe it's 6. It's not that long, really.
Hey, Greg, can you send me the latest safety just so I can?
If you look at Dave on the agenda today, we have a feedback tracker. We have that first document is the version tracker. You can see the latest safety one in that. Let's see if I can find the paper copy.
Okay.
Are you comfortable with the safety being in 8.2, Greg?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think it's important that it's in there. I feel better that it's called out in the beginning of the report to give people the idea. And then, you know, it is what it is. And I think people who are interested will find it.
Okay, so then another question is, originally we had this concept of having a conclusion to this report. Do we still want that? I feel like our conclusion is the executive summary at the beginning. Do we really need to close it?
I don't think we need to say anything else.
Okay.
Congratulate him for making it this far and
yes,
super long document.
If you read to the end, you get a prize.
Yes.
Go to this URL to collect an Amazon gift certificate.
If you get to the end, we'll name a grade separation after you.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
A brick.
I think some members of the public threatened to do that already, by the way. So if it wasn't the one they wanted.
Okay, so is everybody clear on what group they're in? Phil, you have a choice, but Larry and I are breaking off into our own groups. And so that means Carrie, Keith, and Greg, you guys are together, right? And then Dave and In-Young and Phil, I guess, are together.
Well, I can auction myself out to the highest bidder. Just kidding.
Well, I mean, I'm going to make the structural changes we discussed. Other than that, I don't have a real agenda for the South Palo Alto section that I haven't already applied to it. So
which group needs more help?
I think Dave's section might be the one that we need to review, has the more edits to review. So if I don't think you've seen those, Phil, right?
I've seen some of the earlier ones.
Yeah, so I think it'd be best if you could.
All right, so I'll just work with Dave.
Yeah.
That closes out that question. All
Maybe
right.
I have time until the end of this year. So if you want to give me something, I can do it.
So Tony, you should definitely be working on whatever it is you want to put on your minority opinion and whatever you want to put in the appendix. That's what that.
And should I send it to you?
You can share. You can share it with me, and you can share it with Sarah as well, because she'll need to make that public.
Okay.
Nadia, do you have a moment to, not now, but to send an outline of the appendix just so we can stick it in the table of contents?
Yeah, I'll share that with XCAP and make it so that we can make it public. It's literally just a bunch of words, right? I don't think I have the actual documents laid out, but it's
No,
but
just the
I'm
topic
a
headings
list.
would be great, just so we can stick it, so we can see it. I'll keep rebuilding the table of contents, so
Okay.
maybe we can
Sure.
talk about it every time if you want.
Yep,
But at
that'd
least
be
people
good.
can see, yeah,
Yeah, I think that'd be useful.
as it comes together. Yeah.
And then basically what Larry and I are doing, correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, but we're essentially going to start reading from the beginning and see that this is all flowing.
Right.
And we'll review each of the sections that were basically turned in today. We'll sort of just read them again and see if we have any additional comments, but we're more reading for flow and voice and whatever, starting from the executive summary and working through. And thinking through kind of the graphic stuff so that when we get help, that person can help us with sticking those in. Does anybody else have any questions?
I had one comment about Churchill that I didn't share when we went through it.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
In the viaduct, we talk about the Caltrain maximum, and the Caltrain doesn't use that phrase. The AECOM use that phrase. It's actually preferred maximum is what Caltrain has for 1%. And that's a little clear, because if you say the maximum is 1%, then you say, like, why are we messing with something that's more than the maximum? Their preferred maximum is 1%.
Yeah, maximum kind of implies, like the trains will grind to a halt if they try to go up that.
Okay. And then if I could just reiterate to you guys, as you're reading this, if there are words that jump out to you, Larry and I are going to do this as part of our exercise, but if there are words that you feel need to be defined and should be put into the glossary or key terms section, please just shoot me an email so I can add those. And if everyone could also, so you should work on your section. And then the one additional thing is if you could review the glossary and the timeline as well. Those are two fairly short documents, and just, make sure if there's something that you think was a pivotal moment or something that needs to be captured in the timeline, like let me know so I can go find it and put it in there. And then just again, the glossary and the key terms. If you want extra bonus points, have a member of your family take a look at whatever it is you're working on it. And every time they go, well, what does this word mean? And what is this other? That's a really great way to figure out what words are trainees that we didn't realize that we speak. So that would be super useful. Anything else?
Have a great holiday, everyone.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you guys. Have a great holiday. And I will have Sarah make sure, I think we have a meeting tomorrow, but I will send you when everything is due by so that we can get it out to the public in time for our next meeting. So, all right. Happy holidays, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Holidays.
Goodbye.
Yep. Happy holidays.